Chapter 4164. Natalia was not used to the air here, so she said to Huajin, "I'll wait for you outside, okay?" Outside. Huajin looked outside the door hesitantly, feeling a little uneasy. Natalia said, "Don't worry, I won't run around. Besides, didn't you say that it'll be soon?" Huajin thought for a moment and nodded. "You promised me that you won't run around." Ha! If she got lost and Gongjie asked about it, he would lose his head. Natalia ran out, and Huajin watched as she sat on the bench outside the door. Only then did he feel at ease and continue queuing. Natalia waited outside the door, feeling bored. The waiting time was especially long and boring. She thought that she had waited for more than 10 minutes. When she came back to her senses, she stood up and walked to the electronic clock in the hall to look at it. She realized that only 5 minutes had passed. Ding dong. Passengers heading to the Maldives, please take note that your flight DH965 from Eastern Airlines is now boarding. Please bring your personal belongings with you. Oh no, it's too late. It's too late. Not far away, a panicked voice was heard. Before Natalia could react, she was knocked to the ground by a tremendous force. The knitted hat on her head flew far away. Natalia fell to the ground, her back slamming hard against the marble floor. She was in excruciating pain. The person who had bumped into her was a middle-aged woman. It was obvious that she would not make it in time for the flight. Even though she had knocked down the child, she stopped to take a look, but did not come over to help her. She did not even look at her as she left in a hurry. Whispers broke out around her. They were secretly angry that this woman had no manners. Even if she knocked down an adult, she should be concerned about their well-being, let alone a child. She was too rude. By the time Natalia realized that the culprit had run far away, she felt a little depressed. She felt that the bones in her back were about to break after being knocked down so hard for no reason. She stood up and looked at the knitted hat that had fallen in the distance. Just as she was about to walk over and pick it up, a young man was one step ahead of her and picked it up first. Natalia stood where she was in a daze. She silently observed the gentle young man in front of her. The young man was wearing a snow-white shirt, which made his skin look as white as jade. His figure was tall and slender, and he seemed to be in his teens. His neat black hair outlined the outline of his thin face even more clearly. He turned around and looked at Natalia, who was still standing at the same spot. He smirked and walked up to her. Just as he was about to speak, he saw Natalia's purple eyes and was stunned. He had seen many mixed-race children with blue eyes, green eyes, amber eyes, and even pure black eyes, but he had never seen such beautiful purple eyes. Her purple eyes were as pure as beautiful gems. Natalia's eyes flashed. She looked at the hat in his hand and immediately reminded him, "Big brother, this is my hat." The youth immediately reacted, but his gaze was still unable to move away from her eyes for a long time. Natalia looked at him with displeasure and snatched the hat from his hand. "Why do you keep staring at me?" Chapter 4165. "It's nothing." The young man reacted and asked cautiously, "Are you hurt from the fall?" Sensing his concern, Natalia's sharpness faded a little. She nodded gently and said vaguely, "I'm fine." At this moment, a woman's slightly worried voice came from behind. "Linshi, why did you run so fast?" Chuho walked over nervously. She passed through the crowd and finally found him. However, when she saw the girl standing in front of him, she was momentarily stunned. She also saw Natalia's purple eyes. A normal person's first reaction would naturally be surprise. After all, violet eyes were not commonly seen. Chuhi was considered to be well-informed and had seen countless people, but this was the first time she had seen purple eyes. Looking at the beautiful little girl in front of her, she was momentarily stunned. It was normal for her to be in a daze. Behind them, the main group had also arrived. Gu Jinglian held Xiaobao's hand, and a lot of people from the Gu family who were worried about sending them off, such as Uncle Fu and Aunt Fu. It was as if Gu Jinglian had to go on a vacation with his family, and was worried that his enemies would come and bomb the airport. Ever since Chu Ho gave birth to a pair of twins for him, she had been breastfeeding after her confinement. The honeymoon that Gu Jinglian had promised her was delayed again and again. Originally, Chu Ho did not have much expectations for the honeymoon. She did not say that she had been to many places, but she had visited many places, even if it was in the name of a business trip. However, slowly, her friends began to post photos of the trip on their WeChat moments. The blue sky and the sea stretched as far as the eye could see. Chu-ho, who was in Shanghai, seemed to have not seen the blue sky for a long time. Therefore, the idea of going on a honeymoon was put on the agenda again. During this period, Gu Jinglian had finally settled the work at hand and entrusted the two Xiaobao's care. Therefore, he decided to go on a vacation to Saipan. Gu Jinglian was initially a little guilty. After all, the honeymoon had been delayed for so long, and it was only now that it was settled. However, Chu-ho did not mind. At least it was put on the agenda, wasn't it? Gu Jinglian and Xiaobao walked over. Xiaobao saw Lin Shi at first glance, but then he was quickly attracted by the little girl in front of him. He narrowed his eyes until he saw clearly that Natalia's eyes were indeed purple. He was surprised. Wow, what beautiful eyes, he sighed with emotion. However, Natalia was not used to his words, even though he thought they were praises. Since she was young, she knew that she was different from other children. In terms of background, she was an orphan. Since she was young, she did not have a father or a mother, let alone a father or a mother. In terms of appearance, she grew up in China, but she looked different from many Chinese children. Her eyes, in particular, always caused her to be criticized. She had always been treated as an anomaly by the other children. Therefore, when others looked at her kindly, she would feel very uneasy. Coincidentally, Huajin walked out. When Natalia saw him, she immediately threw herself into his arms, feeling wronged. Huajin hugged her tightly. He did not know what was going on. When he looked up, he was dumbfounded. A Gu. President Gu. Chapter 4166. He was shocked. He didn't expect to bump into Gu Jinglian at the airport. Gu Jinglian looked at him, and then at Natalia, who was in his arms. There was a hint of surprise in his eyes. Is this your daughter? Huajin was speechless. Should he admit it? Huajin lowered his head to look at Natalia's aggrieved expression. He did not know what was going on, nor did he know if she had been bullied. Hence he nodded. Yes. Gu Jinglian didn't look surprised when he found out that she was his daughter. Huajin squatted down and asked gently, "What's wrong? You don't look happy. Did someone bully you?" Behind him, Gu Linshi immediately explained. A woman was in a hurry and knocked her down. She left without saying goodbye. Ah, so that's what happened? Huajin immediately became nervous. Does it hurt? Natalia pursed her lips and nodded gently. Yes, a little. Where does it hurt? Here. Natalia didn't want to talk about her bruised butt, so she rubbed her elbow. When she fell, she instinctively supported herself. Hence, her elbow was bruised. Huajin rolled up her sleeves and scrutinized her seriously. It was bruised. His heart ached. He gently breathed on it but didn't rub it. He only felt at ease after making sure that it wasn't fractured. He couldn't rub it now. Otherwise, a small bruise would expand after being rubbed. Huajin carried Natalia and couldn't help but sigh. You're so strong. You didn't even cry. You're amazing. Natalia pouted. She was obviously unhappy. She hugged Huajin's shoulder and said, I don't want to be here anymore. Okay. Then let's wait over there, okay? Natalia nodded. Huajin nodded at Gu Jinglian and Chu-ho before he carried Natalia to the departure lounge. Xiaobao became excited. Wow. That big sister is so pretty. Lin Shi snorted. Maybe she's younger than you. But she's so pretty. I see that you keep staring at her. As if you're obsessed with her. Gu Linshi blushed and immediately retorted. Don't talk nonsense. Why are you blushing? Xiaobao circled him curiously and muttered. Why are you so shy? Ha ha ha. Chu-ho couldn't help but burst into laughter. Lin Shi pouted and looked at Chu-ho. Mom, can you be a little more reserved? Don't laugh so boldly. Bold and unrestrained? How is that bold and unrestrained? Chu-ho glanced at him. Xiaobao is right. You did keep staring at that little sister. Have you fallen in love with her? Even Chu-ho was teasing him. Gu Linshi turned his face away and pretended to be dead. Don't play dead. Chu-ho egged him on. If you like a girl, don't let go of the chance. It just so happens that your dad knows that uncle. Gu Linqi's face turned even redder. Don't talk nonsense. I'm just surprised that her eyes are purple. I've never seen such beautiful eyes. Chu Ho agreed when he heard this. Indeed, that girl's eyes are really beautiful. Chapter 4167. Purple eyes are indeed rare. At least, I've never seen one before. Gu Jinglian said. I just arrived. I thought you were the one who bullied her and made her cry. Gu Linqi disagreed. Why would I bully a girl? Although Linqi was young, he had his own set of philosophies. One of them was that boys should never bully girls. Therefore, he would never bully other girls. Gu Jinglian said to Chu Ho. Wait here for me. I'll go and get the boarding pass done. Okay. Chu Ho chuckled. Gu Jinglian had to do everything himself now. Mu Yaja and Yun Shishir finally arrived at the last moment of the check-in process. When they finally boarded the plane and entered the first-class cabin, Mu Yaja was surprised to find that the first-class cabin was full of familiar faces. The first-class cabin was divided into two sides. On the left side were Mu Yaja, Yun Shishir, Yu, Yueyao, Xiao Chen and Lisa. On the other hand, Gu Jinglian's family of 4 occupied the seats on the other side. The two families were separated by an aisle. When Mu Yaja boarded the plane, he saw Gu Jinglian and Chu Ho staring at them. It's you? It's you. He didn't expect to meet him here. Gu Jinglian raised his eyebrows and sized up Mu Yaja. He snorted coldly. Where are you going? Mu Yaja said, Saipan. Gu Jinglian was speechless. Mu Yaja found it interesting. Which hotel are you staying at? Where are you staying? Siren's Hotel. They said it almost in unison. Gu Jinglian's expression was obviously very awkward. The corner of his mouth twitched slightly, and he snorted coldly. What a coincidence. Are you on your honeymoon? Yes. Mu Yaja nodded and didn't pay too much attention to him. He carried Yue out to the seat, and then began to urge the little guys to fasten their seat belts. As the parent of 4 children, Mu Yaja was very busy. Yun Shishir, on the other hand, was sitting on a chair and eating the fruit salad that Mu Yaja had bought for her at the airport. The Siren's Hotel was the most luxurious hotel in Saipan. The hotel provided seaside vacation villas. Each villa faced the sea and had a large private sea area. Living in such a villa could be said to be looking forward to a perfect vacation. However, the cost of a perfect vacation was not discounted. The cost of this villa was about 500,000 yuan per night. Mu Yaja booked a villa by the sea, so that he could have a quiet vacation. On the other hand, Mu Yaja didn't expect that Gu Jinglian would book a villa next to him. It was also a villa by the sea. He didn't expect to be neighbors on vacation. Mu Yaja lifted the curtains of the floor-to-ceiling window of the master suite, opened the window, and walked out to the balcony. He happened to see Gu Jinglian leaning against the railing and smoking on the balcony opposite. The two men looked at each other silently again. Obviously, they didn't expect that they would book a villa next door to the hotel for their vacation. It was simply like a ghost that won't go away. Like a ghost that won't go away. The two men said almost at the same time. Then, as soon as they finished speaking, they stared at each other with disdain. Gu Jinglian put out the cigarette butt and turned to enter the room. Chapter 4168. This guy was really extraordinarily difficult to deal with. They had just gotten off the plane, and everyone was very tired. Moreover, they were still jet-lagged. Hence, the 4 little brats were extremely sleepy when they checked into the hotel. After Yun Shishir coaxed them into bed, she finally had some time alone with Mu Yaja. Mu Yaja used the rest of his energy to spend a sweet night with her. After that, the two of them hugged each other contentedly and fell asleep. Meanwhile, in the villa next door, Chu Ho and Gu Jinglian had extraordinary energy. Chu Ho had just checked into the hotel when Xiaobao complained that he was sleepy. Due to the time difference in the country, it was already late at night when they arrived at the hotel. Hence, Chu Ho coaxed Xiaobao to sleep. Lin Shi, on the other hand, was able to adapt to the time difference. Hence, Chu Ho and Gu Jinglian took Lin Shi to the beach for a walk. Stepping on the fine sand and kicking the waves, Chu Ho held Gu Jinglian's hand and enjoyed a rare moment of peace. Ever since she gave birth to the twins, Chu Ho felt that she was almost squeezed dry by the 2 little brats during the breastfeeding period. Ordinary people would not understand the torment of the breastfeeding period. Even after the breastfeeding period, the children still needed someone to accompany them. They would always wake up crying every day, and it was torturous. She loved and hated these two little brats at the same time. She loved them because they were her biological children after all. As a mother, how could she not love them? She hated them because Chuho was deeply tortured by these two little crybabies. Hence, she had to quickly escape for a period of time to avoid trouble. Now she finally had some peace. Although it would be a lie to say that she did not miss them. She felt more relaxed than ever. Gu Jinglian also felt sorry for her. He knew that she had been busy for a long time after the breastfeeding period for the 4 children. When he saw this, he also felt sorry for her. Hence, he put the honeymoon on the agenda, so that she could relax for a period of time. After all, she could not put the cart before the horse, and confuse the meaning of marriage for the sake of the children after marriage. Other than family, marriage was more about the feelings between husband and wife. During that period of time, he was busy with work and rarely spent time with her. Thus, he thought of using the honeymoon as an opportunity to make up for their relationship. He thought that she would feel sleepy after the plane landed. However, he was wrong. Who was Chuho? She used to be an Interpol anti-crime inspector, and her physical fitness was much better than many men. It just so happened that Gu Jinglian was not tired. Chuho even teased him. After all, he was an old man. How could he be so good at enduring jet lag? Gu Jinglian was a little unhappy when he heard this. What do you mean an old man? He was clearly still very young, all right. Gu Jinglian was a little unhappy, so he whispered in her ear. You dare to doubt my physical fitness? I'll teach you a lesson tonight. When Chuho heard this, his face turned slightly red, but he laughed helplessly. I was just joking, and you actually took it seriously. Are you a child? Yes, I'm childish. I'm hopeless. When Chuho heard this, she could not do anything about it. Just as she was laughing, Gu Jinglian walked over and gently held her hand. Do you like it here? Gu Jinglian's voice became gentle. Chuho said sincerely, I like it. It's very quiet. Even with the sea breeze, I can feel my heart calming down. Then we can come here often in the future. Chapter 4169. No, I won't, Gu Jinglian said. I want to buy a villa here. In the future, when we have time, we can still come over and play for as long as we want. As long as you like it. Chuho couldn't help but feel a little flattered. Although Gu Jinglian doted on her immensely after their marriage, it was a little too much for him to say that he wanted to buy a villa here just because she said that she liked it here. Chuho asked tentatively, the villas here should be very expensive, right? I heard that some of the private islands here can be sold. Chuho was speechless when she heard this. I heard that the villas here are very expensive. A private island must be very expensive. Gu Jinglian smiled and said, if you like it, it has its value. Chuho couldn't help but laugh when she heard this. Actually, there's no need for that. As long as you have the intention. If you want to come here again in the future, you can just find another chance to come. How many more chances will you have to come here in the future? This money is too extravagant and wasteful. Gu Jinglian didn't think much of it when he heard this, but he didn't take it too seriously. After all, Chuho was Chuho, and he was him. There was a huge gap between the two people's spending habits. Xiao Bao had once had a very difficult time. That was a period when she only had a basic salary of $2,000 a month and a few $100s of overtime pay, but she had to raise Xiao Bao alone. One could imagine how difficult that period of time was. When she was young, Chuho had also experienced a homeless life. She had stayed in a refugee camp, and even a small piece of bread had to be taken from others. Sometimes she could only snatch scraps. As a result, she could only endure a night of hunger. Therefore, she had always thought that money was very precious. After marrying Gu Jinglian, she could be said to have reached the heavens in a single bound. What did it mean to become rich overnight? This was it. Gu Jinglian was very wealthy. Even Gu Jinglian didn't know how much wealth he had. However, she couldn't get used to living an extravagant life. She was an optimistic person by nature, and was good at finding joy in hardship. She was used to living a hard life, and always felt that she was very poor psychologically. Living a down-to-earth life made her feel at ease. Chu-ho was a very independent woman and didn't like to rely on others. Gu Jinglian didn't allow her to go out to work because he thought that the Gu family's business. However, Chu-ho wasn't used to living and took a long time to get used to it. Gu Jinglian was different. When he was in the past, he was in primary school. Gu's family was T. Old Master Gu was willing to give him more than $100 bills a day. This was a treatment that no one else had ever received. SSS Tuzazes, Teet. The difference could be seen at a glance. Therefore, Gu Jinglian, who grew up in a privileged environment, naturally didn't have the concept of money. To him, a Gucci bag that cost tens of thousands of dollars was equivalent to lunch in the eyes of ordinary people. Ever since she married Gu Jinglian, Chu-ho's words and actions gave Gu Jinglian a headache. Chapter 4170. She was addicted to online shopping. Ever since she learned how to shop online, she was used to going online to search for quality goods. She would buy them in bulk. Gu Jinglian went to the mall to buy her a few luxurious clothes, bags, and shoes. Gucci, Christina, etc. However, Chu-ho did not want them after wearing them a few times. She was too lazy to dress herself up. Those branded clothes and bags were often the most useless. Especially a silk dress from Chanel. Just a slight movement of the arm would cause it to unravel. Chu-ho despised it. How could such expensive clothes be so useless? Although she knew that people who could afford such expensive clothes would not be calculative about such things, she still despised it. As a woman, she actually complained to Gu Jinglian that she had spent so much time shopping and spent so much energy just to buy a few clothes that could not be worn more than a few times. She felt very angry. After that, Gu Jinglian did not force her anymore. Since two people were married, they should respect each other. It was basic respect. They respected the concept of consumption. Therefore, after Gu Jinglian and Chu-ho got married, he followed her when it came to the concept of consumption. Even his own concept of consumption was gradually influenced by her. In layman's terms, Old Master Gu had become much more down-to-earth. In the past, he did not want luxury goods. Now, when he occasionally received clothes that Chu-ho bought for him online, he would be happy to try them on. If they looked good, he would buy them back. After a while, Gu Jinglian also got used to clothes that cost a few hundred yuan. One had to know that to him, clothes that cost a few hundred yuan were no different from clothes that cost a few cents in the eyes of ordinary people. In short, the huge difference in concept caused by money was very big. Both of them could adapt very well. Gu Jinglian held Chu-ho's hand and walked quietly by the beach. Gu Linshi was originally following behind them. However, when he found something new and pestered them to look at it, he bitterly realized that he had been abandoned. No matter whether he called out to Gu Jinglian or Chu-ho, the two of them acted as if they did not hear him. They only had eyes for each other. They had already forgotten about him, this little third wheel. Gu Linshi also gave up. Forget it. Let the two of them be entangled. After all, she heard that Dad wanted to take this opportunity to revisit the honeymoon period with Mom. He didn't want to get involved. Gu Linshi was smart, so she went back to the hotel alone and called Gu Jinglian Chu-ho. He was more sensible. He quietly returned to the hotel, and even knew to send a text message, so that they wouldn't worry. Chu-ho and Gu Jinglian walked for a long time, but they did not seem to notice anything. After walking for a long time, Chu-ho realized that his little tail was gone. He took out his phone and was about to make a call when he received a message from Gu Linshi. Seeing that he had returned to the hotel, Chu-ho's heart was filled with guilt. She had been so focused on walking and chatting with Gu Jinglian that she had forgotten about this guy. Gu Jinglian said helplessly, "It's okay. Linshi is very old. He has his own thoughts. I think he wants to give us more space." On the surface he said this, but in his heart, he was criticizing this kid. At least he knew what was good for him. Just now, when Linshi called out to him, he heard it but deliberately ignored it. He thought that if this kid knew what he was doing, he would not disturb them anymore. Obviously, this kid knew what he was doing. Chapter 4171. Chu-ho said to Gu Jinglian, "Why don't we go back earlier too? Don't be too late. The children are already awake, but we're still asleep. If the children want to play, We won't have the energy to do so. However, Gu Jinglian said, Linshi is already so old. He'll definitely bring Xiaobao to play. We might not like the things that children like to play. Why don't we let them play while we go on our honeymoon? Chu Ho was speechless. So they were really here to make up for their honeymoon? Chu Ho muttered, Don't tell me, you didn't want to bring them along in the first place? Humph. At the mention of this, Gu Jinglian was very displeased. He didn't even mention this to Lin Shi and Xiaobao. It was Chu Ho who had spoken out of turn and told Lin Shi. Lin Shi thought that Gu Jinglian wanted them to go on a vacation together, so he told Xiaobao excitedly. In the end, Gu Jinglian happened to see that the two of them had already started to pack their luggage in full swing. What else could he say? He could only suppress his anger and pack the two of them up. However, Lin Shi was still considered tactful. On the plane, he took the initiative to take care of Xiaobao. If anything happened to Xiaobao, he would take care of it. Gu Jinglian was quite satisfied with this. When they returned to the hotel, Lin Shi was already asleep. Xiaobao was also sound asleep. Gu Jinglian and Chu Ho were affectionate for a while before they couldn't resist the fatigue and fell asleep. The next day, Gu Jinglian and Chu Ho woke up and walked to the other bedroom to take a look. They found that Lin Shi and Xiaobao were not there. When they asked about room, the cleaner from Room Clean said that the two children had run to the beach to play volleyball as soon as they woke up. However, the cleaner also mentioned that the 4 children in the other row were also there. The group split into 2 groups and played beach volleyball. Gu Jinglian found it interesting. It had to be said that these 2 guys really knew how to entertain themselves. Seeing that they didn't wake up, Lin Shi took Xiaobao to play. After Gu Jinglian and Chu Ho ate some food and headed to the beach, they saw Gu Linshi and Xiaobao standing on an empty beach. Opposite them were Yu Yu and Lisa. The 4 players glared at each other. The ball was in Lin Shi's hands, but Gu Jinglian's eyes were sharp. He could feel that Lin Shi's hands were trembling slightly. Chu Ho also noticed this and walked over worriedly. Lin Shi. When Lin Shi heard this, he turned around. When he saw them, he was a little surprised. Dad, Mom. As soon as Xiaobao turned around and saw Chu Ho holding his wrist, he immediately threw himself into her arms, feeling wronged. Mom. Woo woo woo. The little guy was bluffing and crying, but he didn't cry for real. Although he felt wronged, he wasn't so weak that he would cry. They're bullying us. Woo woo woo. Bullying? That's impossible. She knew Muyaja and Yin Shishir's characters. She had met them a few times before, and she could tell that the couple was very well-mannered. When it came to educating children, they were naturally well-mannered. How could they bully other people's children? Don't listen to his nonsense. Lin Shi sighed and mumbled in a low voice. They're not bullying us. We can't play as well as others. What's wrong? Chu Ho finally understood. You lost to them in volleyball? Chapter 4172. If it's just a loss, then it's fine. Lin Shi said awkwardly. I can catch the ball, but it's too strong. If I insist on catching it, then my wrist will feel a burning pain. Chu He's face was full of questions. He looked at the other side. Yu Yu and Lisa. Both of them were still young and one of them was a girl. Yu Yu was younger than Lin Shi. He looked at Lisa, whom he had never seen before, but she looked thin and weak. Chu Ho could not believe it. It can't be. You actually lost to them? One of them is younger than you and the other is a girl. She's so skinny, how can she be so strong? Xiaobao panicked. It's true. She's so strong. I saw her wearing a singlet just now. Don't be fooled by her skinny figure. She's got muscles underneath. Lin Shi was indignant. After all, as a boy, losing to a girl was an embarrassing thing. However, whether he was willing to admit it or not, it was the truth. Lisa did not like to talk, but whenever she jumped up and spiked the ball, he was worried that she would accidentally hit the volleyball. Xiaobao had caught her ball once, and was so scared that he started trembling. He did not dare to catch her ball again. Lin Shi was naturally unwilling to admit defeat. Hence, when it was Lisa's turn to hit the ball, even if he knew that she was strong, he would still try to catch it. When he caught the ball, both his wrists were trembling badly. He was afraid that he would not be able to continue playing. Lisa also realized that Lin Shi would not be able to catch her ball. She felt that it was boring and a little disappointing, so she stopped playing. However, they were halfway through the game, and the winner had not been decided yet. Lin Shi refused to admit defeat, nor did he want to admit defeat, so he insisted on continuing. Lisa did not know whether to laugh or cry. She asked him instead, "Can you continue playing?" Lin Shi bit his lip hard and did not speak. At this moment, Gu Jinglian and Chu Ho arrived. To be honest, he probably couldn't continue fighting. Otherwise, his wrists would definitely swell up. However, he did not want to lose to a girl. He was a boy, and Lisa was a girl. If he had lost to Yu, it would have been fine. However, he could not accept losing to Lisa. Lisa rubbed her hair helplessly and said seriously, "To be honest, I admit defeat. We can't continue this match. You're injured." So Lisa casually threw the volleyball to the side and stretched her body. She had only used a third of her strength when she was playing volleyball, but the two kids couldn't take it anymore. Normally, people with great strength wouldn't know how to control their strength even if they wanted to deliberately conserve it. Because for Lisa, she was already cautious enough. Lisa even had the illusion that Lin Shi and Xiaobao were glass dolls that would break if they were not careful. Lin Shi was unwilling to give up. She pursed her lips and looked unhappy. Chu Ho was a little curious. Why? How terrifying was her strength that even Lin Shi was injured. She suddenly took a step forward and looked at Lisa's back. She smiled and said, "Why don't we play a game?" Lisa came back to her senses and looked at her in surprise. "Why? I want to see how strong you are." Lisa's lips twitched when she heard that. Chu Ho hurriedly said, "Don't worry. I just want to learn from you. I'm not seeking revenge." All right. Chapter 4173. The corners of Yu Yu's lips twitched. He could vaguely feel that there was a hint of tension in the volleyball match. Lisa said to him, "Go to one side. I'll have a match with her." This, Xiao Yichen thought to himself helplessly. Is there really a point to this match? No matter who wins, it won't be a dignified victory, right? Lisa would still be fine. If Chu Ho won, he would think that she was an adult and would stoop to the level of a child. If she lost, he would think that it was too embarrassing for an adult to lose to a child. Lin Shi said hesitantly, "Forget it, I admit defeat." Don't misunderstand. With a smile on her face, Chu He walked to Lin Shi's side and picked up the volleyball from the ground. Dusting off the sand on it, she said with a smile, "I just wanted to see how strong a girl can be to almost hurt a boy's hand." Lisa was expressionless when she heard this. "He was the one who wanted to play with me. I saw that he was injured and didn't want to play anymore. He doesn't want to admit defeat." Lisa was naturally competitive, especially in a situation where she could win. She would never admit defeat unless someone had the ability to convince her. "Then, can you let me have a taste of your skills?" Chu Ho asked tentatively. Lisa was in a daze. She felt that the face in front of her seemed familiar. Vermilion bird? A noun flashed through her mind. There was a vermilion bird in the Hurricane Group. There was also a vermilion bird in the International Criminal Police Organization. One was a black vermilion bird while the other was a white vermilion bird. Everyone used this name to distinguish between the two. Lisa was a junior and had never seen white vermilion bird in person. However, she remembered seeing a picture of white vermilion bird. She was smiling and her eyes were full of confidence. She looked very similar to the woman in front of her. She couldn't help but feel suspicious. Just as she was in a daze, Chu Ho couldn't help but remind her, "Are you ready?" Lisa immediately reacted. She took half a step back and bowed slightly. She immediately returned to her battle stance. Chu Ho served. She held the volleyball up high and made a standard serve. The volleyball flew over the railing. Lisa's reaction was quick. Like a cat, she darted forward and used her considerable jumping ability to hit the volleyball back. A special volleyball match was about to begin. Mu Yaja and Yin Shishir came back from their walk on the beach and saw this scene. Hua Jin, who was following behind her, saw it as well. Of Xiao Yichen and Yu Yu were still asleep, and Xiao Yichen and Yu Yu were still asleep. Of Xiao Yichen and of Yu Yu of them. Of course. And Yo. Xiao Yichen and Yu of Yu Yu's aunts. And Yu Yu. After taking a stroll around the area, they were greeted by such a sight as soon as they returned. Everyone found it a little novel. Yin Shishir was a little surprised. What are they doing? Volleyball. But Yun Shirshir and Hua Jin stared blankly at the two people who were in full swing. The sound of the volleyball hitting the ball was shocking. This volleyball is too scary. Muyaja thought it was interesting. Let's go and take a look. The group walked to the side. Xiao Yichen noticed them. Muyaja gestured for him to keep quiet and watched silently. Chu Ho and Lisa were evenly matched. One was a former Interpol officer, while the other was the youngest mercenary in Mercenary Paradise. Both of them were terrifyingly strong. Chapter 4174. Chu Ho in particular was shocked. Before she had experienced the match, she could already imagine that Lisa's strength was not weak. Otherwise, Lin Qi's wrist would not have been so injured. However, she did not expect Lisa's strength to be so terrifying. She even felt that this girl's potential was far above hers. As the saying went, the younger generation will surpass us in time. That was the gist of it. As for Lisa, how could she not be surprised? What she did not expect was that Chu Ho's strength would be so great. She looked gentle and weak, but she did not expect that her strength would not be inferior to that of an official mercenary. Because of this, she was even more certain that the woman in front of her must be the governor of the International Criminal Police Force. She was amazing. To be able to compete with a famous character, Lisa's heart was immediately filled with motivation. She was not to be underestimated. Even if it was just a volleyball match, she would give it her all. Lisa was a person who had a strong desire to win. She would either never compete with others, or she would always want to be the best. The game was no exception. After a few rounds, no one was at a disadvantage. The score was maintained at a stalemate, and no one was willing to give way to the other. Even if one party led by a few points, the other party would catch up immediately. Bang! 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 Those who were in the know would know that they were playing volleyball, but those who were not would probably think that there was an explosion. Lisa gradually felt that the volleyball was going soft. It was full of air, but now, it felt like it was running out of energy. Not to mention Xiao Yichen and Yu Yu. Even Gu Jinglian was trembling with fear. Not to mention Yun Shirshir and Hua Jin, who were not far away. Hua Jin asked meekly, "If they play like this, will they break their hands?" Yun Shirshir muttered. "I don't know if Chu Ho will, but I'm sure Lisa won't." "Why? Have you ever seen a child this big lift a 20-kilogram dumbbell like it's a toy?" Yun Shirshir still had some lingering fears. Last time, in the gym at home, she wanted to put away the dumbbells Lisa used for training. In the end, when she bent down to pick them up, she almost sprained her back. So heavy. From then on, she didn't dare to pick up any of Lisa's fitness equipment. If he wasn't careful, his waist would really sprain. Hua Jin muttered, "That's a little too scary." Yun Shirshir was rather curious. "I'm thinking, if Yaja were to play volleyball with Gu Jinglian, who would win?" Hua Jin looked at Muyaja and then at Gu Jinglian. He said weakly, "Brother-in-law is definitely the best." "Oh, do you think so too?" Muyaja could tell that Hua Jin's survival instincts were playing tricks on him. Hua Jin immediately expressed his sincerity. "Of course. I really believe so." Muyaja couldn't help but laugh. He said calmly, "I've never played with Gu Jinglian before, but I don't think he's afraid of me." The match had been going on for half an hour. Lisa and Chu Ho were gradually showing signs of fatigue. After such a long time of exhaustion, their bodies were made of flesh and blood, not metal. Their stamina was depleted very quickly. Xiao Yichen stopped the match. At this stage of the match, it was obvious who would win and who would lose. Although the scores were about the same, Chu Ho's stamina was obviously running out. Chapter 4175. When Chu Ho heard this, he was indignant, but he still stopped the match. It had to be said that Lisa's stamina was amazing. Before the match, she had already played half the match and had not rested in between. It was not easy for her to fight like this. Xiao Yichen had just walked to Lisa's side when Gu Jinglian suddenly said, "Why don't we have a match?" Xiao Yichen looked around him and confirmed that Gu Jinglian was challenging him to a match. He was dumbfounded. "Are you serious?" When Gu Jinglian heard this, he said, "Are you scared?" "No." Xiao Yichen furrowed his brows in embarrassment and said, "I'm afraid that you'll lose face if you lose to me." Gu Jinglian's face immediately turned pale. Puffed. When Chu Ho heard this, he was overjoyed. Ha ha ha. This sentence sounded arrogant, but Xiao Yichen looked really embarrassed, as if he was really worried that Gu Jinglian would lose face if he lost to him. Gu Jinglian was speechless and said, "How can you be so sure that I'll lose to you?" "Because, it's true," Xiao Yichen said hesitantly. "I don't know how to fix a match." Yu said solemnly, "If Xiao Yichen plays, the volleyball will probably explode." Lisa nodded as well. The three children looked at Gu Jinglian sincerely, as if they were thinking about him. When he said this, Gu Jinglian felt very awkward. He was a grown man, yet he had to let a child go easy on him. He said angrily, "You don't have to go easy on me. I might not lose if I play against you." "This isn't a good idea?" Xiao Yichen scratched his head in embarrassment and said, You really can't beat me. If I hurt you, Daddy will say that I'm causing trouble again." He did not know that Mu Yaja was standing not far away. When Mu Yaja heard his son say that, he secretly said, "It's okay, Daddy won't scold you. Trample on him." Yin Shirshir glanced at her man coldly. Why did he become so childish at this time? Gu Jinglian was unwilling to give up. He felt that he was being looked down upon by these three children, so he insisted on having a go. "Let's just play one round then." In the worst-case scenario, he would not use as much force. Xiao Yichen picked up the ball and served it casually. Gu Jinglian was displeased when he saw that Xiao Yichen did not receive the ball. "Are you looking down on me?" "No, I was afraid that you wouldn't be able to connect it." Gu Jinglian's lips twitched again. "Play well for me." As he spoke, he served a powerful ball. When Xiao Yichen saw that Gu Jinglian was serious, he quickly became serious. He rushed forward, jumped up, and spiked the ball beautifully. He immediately hooked the ball into the net. Gu Jinglian rushed forward and saved the ball. The two of them gradually got into a heated match. Yu muttered speechlessly at the side. Why is he acting like a child when he's already an adult? Lisa panted for a moment before she finally managed to catch her breath. Chu Ho, who was beside her, was so tired that she squatted on the ground. She had not exercised so much in a long time. Her heartbeat could not keep up, and she was perspiring all over. However, she truly felt that Lisa's skills were formidable. What was even more impressive was that this little girl already had such terrifying strength at such a young age. It was obvious that she had received professional training. She was young, but her skills were not yet mature. How scary. Chapter 4176. Just as everyone was engrossed in watching the match, Xiao Yichen jumped and spiked the ball. Gu Jinglian reached out to catch the ball, but at that moment, he felt a spark of electricity and he couldn't help but withdraw his hand. This was the body's self-defense mechanism. No matter how strong the ball was, if he were to receive it, he would probably dislocate his shoulder or break his bones. The body had a self-defense mechanism. Gu Jinglian instinctively felt that there was no way he could receive the ball, so he instinctively withdrew his hand. The ball immediately bounced onto the cement beside him. There was a loud bang, followed by the sound of an explosion. The volleyball rolled onto the sand, but it was obviously deflated. It exploded. This was the first time Chu Ho had seen the ball explode from a child. He was stunned. Gu Jinglian was also stunned. He knew that Xiao Yichen was very good and strong, but he had never imagined that Xiao Yichen's strength was so terrifying. Yin Shirshir and Hua Jin were also stunned. The whole world seemed to have returned to silence. Xiao Yichen looked at the broken volleyball regretfully. His gaze fell on Gu Jinglian, but he saw that the man was still standing there expressionlessly. He only harumphed and said, "Not bad, I lost." Wow. Xiao Yichen stared at the man in front of him in disbelief. He had never thought that Gu Jinglian would admit defeat. Only Chu Ho and Yu saw that Gu Jinglian's hand, which was hidden behind his back, was trembling slightly. His wrist was obviously swollen. Chu Ho walked over and carefully probed. "Your hand is swollen." "Sure." Gu Jinglian glanced at him. "Give me some face." This man. At such a critical moment, he was still thinking about face. However, on second thought, it was human nature. Although he admitted defeat, he couldn't let the other party feel that he had lost too badly. A 1.8-meter tall man playing volleyball with a child's size ended up straining his wrist. He would feel embarrassed if he told others about it. Gu Jinglian wanted to save face. You should be okay, right? It's just swollen. It's fine. Xiao-Chen, can you? Lisa looked dejectedly at the ball that was slowly deflating. Can't you hit it more gently? My only volleyball is broken. What am I going to play in the future? Xiao-Chen said angrily. Buy more. That's easy for you to say. Do they sell volleyball on this island? Yes, you said. There's a convenience store near the hotel that sells beach volleyball. Xiao-Chen said embarrassedly. Lisa, don't be angry. I'll compensate you. Xiao-Chen patiently coaxed Lisa, while Gu Jinglian and Chu-Ho exchanged glances. Were these two children the reincarnation of monsters? So strong. They were too violent. It had to be said that Xiao-Chen and Lisa were inexplicably compatible. They were equally violent and had monstrous strength. Chu-Ho and Gu Jinglian respectively experienced the terrifying strength of the two children. Then they looked at Xiaobao, who was stunned. Chu-Ho didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Xiaobao had already seen what was going on. Meanwhile, Lin Shi's mind was almost stuck as he watched the scene unfold. Fortunately, he had withdrawn from the game in time. He also had reason to believe that Lisa had really given in when they were fighting. Otherwise, he would have lost even more miserably. Even though he was unwilling to admit defeat, he had to admit defeat. Chapter 4177. Of course, they could not play volleyball. It happened to be dinner time, so Gu Jinglian booked a candlelight dinner and planned to relive the sweetness of their marriage with Chu-Ho. At dusk, the beach, the setting sun, the candlelight, and the classic foie gras filet mignon quietly waited for the arrival of the night. Such a scene was very beautiful just by imagining it. Gu Jinglian had put a lot of thought into this trip. Since they were on vacation, they had to do everything perfectly. He was a perfectionist. Therefore, as long as he wanted to do something well, there was no excuse or reason why he couldn't do it well. Chu-Ho, on the other hand, had put a lot of thought into him. When the candlelight dinner was ready, Chu-Ho was still worrying about what delicious food there was on the island. She was hungry, and her head was full of steak and hamburgers. Gu Jinglian sent the two children to other restaurants on the island to eat with the bodyguards. Then, he happily prepared to have a candlelight dinner with Chu-Ho. Lin Shi knew his intentions, so she did not say anything and promised to take good care of Xiaobao. Then she held Xiaobao's hand and walked away, coaxing and cajoling her. Gu Jinglian was looking forward to the romantic candlelight dinner. He said that he wanted to give Chu-Ho a surprise, but just now he held her hand and walked to the beach. Chu-Ho saw the small dining table from afar. It was only big enough for two people to sit face to face, and there were snacks and beautiful candlesticks on the table. Chu-Ho widened her eyes in surprise. This is a candlelight dinner. Gu Jinglian looked at her affectionately. Do you like it? Chu-Ho was stunned for a moment. Then she turned around and looked up at him. She smiled and squinted her eyes. I like it. She tiptoed, put her arms around his shoulders, and planted a kiss on his cheek. Although this man was always disliked by her for not being romantic enough, occasionally, he would deliberately create a romantic surprise. She had also fantasized about their romantic honeymoon. Although it had been delayed a lot, it did not stop her from looking forward to their honeymoon. Gu Jinglian held her hand and sat down. After the two of them sat down, the candlelight dinner officially began. Just as the main course was being served one after another, Gu Jinglian suddenly caught a whiff of smoke. After him, Chu-Ho also caught a whiff of smoke. Gu Jinglian did not know where the smoky smell came from at first. It was the unique smoky smell of barbecue. The smoky smell was mixed with the aroma of barbecued meat. He frowned slightly and looked in the direction of the smoke, only to find that there was a nervous voice coming from the courtyard that was only a wall away from his villa. Ah no, it's too hot. It's burnt. It seems to be on fire. From the voice, it seemed to be Yin Shishir's voice. Then, Xiao-Chen and Lisa's voices could be heard. I told you that you put too much oil on it, but you didn't believe me. It's easy to catch fire like this. Oh no, it's burnt. It's probably inedible. Throw it aside. Sob sob, my chicken skewers. You still have the nerve to sob. If you didn't put so much oil on it, who would be burnt? It's my first time barbecuing. Gu Jinglian was speechless. These guys were actually barbecuing at the seaside. Moreover, this group of fellows actually made the smoke so big that it spread to the walls of his courtyard. He was eating Western food. They were getting married. The barbecue next door was a mess. Chapter 4178. Gu Jinglian was so angry that he was about to explode. Chu-ho also knew that the smell of smoke was probably coming from next door. It seemed that she could also vaguely smell the oysters. She was a little hungry, but when she realized that Gu Jinglian was looking at her meaningfully, she immediately smiled and said, "It's okay. We'll eat our food. It won't affect us." "It won't affect us?" Gu Jinglian narrowed his eyes and was a little unhappy. The smell of their smoke had already drifted to his nose. How could this not affect them? Were they deliberately causing trouble? Gu Jinglian's expression became more and more ugly. When Chu-ho saw this, she said helplessly, "Don't spoil the mood. I think the atmosphere of barbecued barbecue is quite good." "Oh, then you think that a candlelight dinner is not as good as a barbecued barbecue?" Chu-ho simply remained silent. It was obvious that Gu Jinglian's rare good mood had been ruined by the smell of smoke. It felt like Gu Jinglian and Muyaja were two men eyeing each other covetously. After all, two tigers could not live on the same mountain. Chu-ho did not want to cause any trouble, so she carefully comforted him. "Don't be angry. I've already felt your intentions. Nothing is absolutely perfect, but..." Gu Jinglian put down his knife and fork with a livid expression. Chu-ho did not dare to speak. At this moment, Gu Jinglian suddenly heard Xiaobao's noisy voice from next door. "Wow. This is delicious. What is this?" "This is a scallop." It seemed to be Lin Shi's voice. Gu Jinglian's expression was one of disbelief. Why did Lin Shi and Xiaobao's voices appear next door? What was going on? Chu-ho was also a little surprised. "Didn't you say that Xiaobao and Lin Shi have already settled down and are going to the restaurant on the island for dinner?" Gu Jinglian stood up in confusion and walked towards the source of the sound. When Chu-ho saw him stand up, he immediately got up and followed closely behind. The two villas were separated by a snow-white railing. Through the fence, one could see the scene in the private courtyard opposite. Gu Jinglian walked over and was speechless when he saw Xiaobao and Lin Shi, the two clowns, jumping around the three barbecue grills. The yard was very big, so it was more than enough to set up 3 barbecue grills. It was Xiaobao's first time cuffing barbecue, so he was very excited. In order to prepare for the barbecue, Muyaja and Yun Shishir spent the whole afternoon preparing and finally finished. Other than some vegetarian dishes, there were also beef, bacon, pork, and most of the ingredients were seafood. Living by the sea, eating by the sea. The seafood here was caught by the local fishermen of Saipan, so it was very fresh. The seafood that was cuffed was very plump and tender. Chu-ho walked to Gu Jinglian's side and followed his gloomy gaze. She immediately saw Xiaobao and Lin Shi's figures, and the corners of her mouth twitched slightly. Gu Jinglian was angry. "Gu Qingzi!" He roared angrily. Xiaobao, who was separated by a fence, shuddered and immediately stood at attention. He subconsciously looked around and did not know where the sound came from. It was not until Lin Shi saw Gu Jinglian's figure that he tugged at the corner of his shirt and pointed in the direction that he saw Gu Jinglian. Gu Jinglian's face darkened even more. How could he have given birth to such a stupid son? "Dad." Xiaobao waved at him. "Come on, let's play together." Gu Jinglian's face turned even paler. Chapter 4179. Compared to Xiaobao's excitement, Lin Shi felt inexplicably uneasy. He had a feeling that Gu Jinglian's expression was not good. He was sensitive enough to sense that his father did not seem to like Uncle Muyaja very much. Originally, he and Xiaobao had been taken out to eat at a restaurant on the island, but when they passed by Muyaja's private villa, they bumped into Yun Shishir. Yun Shishir warmly invited him and Xiaobao to barbecue. He had never barbecued barbecue before, so he couldn't resist the temptation and agreed. In the end, he was so happy that he forgot about home. He didn't expect that he would be lured here. Yun Shishir saw that Lin Shi and Xiaobao were standing still. She followed their gaze and saw Gu Jinglian and Chu-ho's voices. She smiled and walked over. She looked at Chu-ho and then at Gu Jinglian. She smiled and said, "Do you want to join us?" Chu-ho was just about to nod. She also wanted to barbecue. Most importantly, the aroma of the barbecue was too tempting. It would have been better if they didn't come closer. Once they came closer, the aroma made it impossible for them to resist. However, whether they could join them or not depended on whether Gu Jinglian was willing to do so. She looked up at Gu Jinglian. Gu Jinglian's expression softened a little. If Mu Yaja had come over and asked him if he wanted to join them, he would have rejected him firmly and rolled his eyes at him. However, the person who came was Yin Shirshir. He had always been very gentlemanly towards women. Hence, he felt that he would not give other women too much of a hard time. He declined politely, no need. Yin Shirshir felt that it was a pity. Why? Isn't it fun to be together as a family? Besides, Xiao Bao and Lin Shi also want to barbecue with you guys. Gu Jinglian's gaze was slightly stunned. He looked at Xiao Bao and Lin Shi, who were not far away, but saw that the two of them couldn't help but cast their hopeful gazes on him. Their faces were full of anticipation. Chu Ho couldn't bear it inside. Let's go together. Xiao Bao and Lin Shi want us to join them. Gu Jinglian and Chu Ho looked at each other and finally bit the bullet and agreed. He and Chu He entered the courtyard. At this time, Yin Shirshir had someone set up a barbecue grill. Xiao Bao's him. Gu Jinglian didn't even look at him and reached out his hand to grab him by the ear. Ouch! Xiao Bao furrowed his brows in pain and his shoulders slumped. Didn't I tell you to eat? Gu Jinglian snapped. What are you doing here? Xiao Bao pouted guiltily and said pitifully, I want to eat barbecue. I don't want to eat alone. It's so much fun to have a barbecue with so many people. What do you mean by eating alone? Didn't Lin Shi accompany you? Xiao Bao snorted. He doesn't count. Lin Shi was speechless. Why didn't he count? Yin Shirshir walked over and said, It's fun for children to gather together. Look, there are 4 or 5 children here. If they're together, they won't be lonely. Chu Ho was very touched. His impression of Yin Shirshir immediately improved. He could tell that Yin Shirshir really liked children. Her gentleness towards Xiao Bao and Lin Shi was definitely not just superficial. Most importantly, she was also very patient with children. Xiao Bao also liked Yin Shirshir very much. Lin Shi also liked her very much. Most importantly, that girl was also there. Lin Shi looked in one direction from time to time. That was where Natalia was standing. Chapter 4180. Natalia stood beside Hua Jin and watched him grill the oysters. She was obviously craving them, but she still pretended to be reserved. For some reason, she vaguely felt that someone was looking at her. Natalia's sixth sense was extremely sharp. She turned her head in surprise and saw Lin Shi's gaze on her. She frowned and opened her mouth, but hesitated to speak. Hua Jin saw that she was absent-minded, but he saw that she was looking somewhere else, so he followed her gaze. He saw that Lin Shi kept looking in her direction. Hua Jin's lips twitched. Why does he keep staring at me? Natalia wasn't used to it. She put her arms around her shoulders. It felt weird to be stared at like this. Hua Jin couldn't help but tease her. Because our Natalia is pretty and boys like her. I don't want him to like me. Natalia awkwardly hid behind Hua Jin. At the same time, Yu, who was standing at the side, also noticed the man's deep and meaningful gaze on Natalia. He frowned slightly and couldn't help but feel a little unhappy. He put down the ingredients in his hand and walked to Lin Shi's side. He purposely knocked Lin Shi's shoulder to the side. Lin Shi came back to his senses and looked at Yu, who had appeared behind him without him noticing. What's wrong? Why are you in a daze? Yu glanced at the scallop in his hand. Are your scallops almost burnt? Gu Linshi quickly lowered his head and looked at the scallop in his hand. Indeed, because it hadn't been taken care of for a long time, it already smelled a little burnt. Oh no. Gu Linshi quickly put the scallop aside with a pair of tongs, feeling a little lonely. Sigh, it burned again. He couldn't remember how many scallops it was, but it should be the third one. Scallops were really difficult to grill. It was easy to see other people grilling them, but it wasn't easy to grill them yourself. It's burnt again. Yin Shirshir walked over, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. How did it get burnt? Before Gu Linshi could say anything, Yu said coldly, Because I was daydreaming. In a daze. Yin Shirshir laughed and said, If you're in a daze, it's easy to burn. Got it. I'll be more careful next time. Gu Linqi explained. I was distracted and didn't pay attention, so it's okay. There are many oysters and scallops here. Remember, you can't eat burnt ones. You'll have diarrhea. Yes. Yin Shirshir walked to the side to check on Xiaoyi Chen. After Yin Shirshir left, Gu Linqi looked at Yu strangely. She felt that this guy had an inexplicable hostility in his eyes. You? Gu Linqi asked hesitantly. What do you want? Nothing. Yu was obviously not friendly to him. It could be said that he was very cold. He turned around and walked away. Gu Linqi didn't know what was going on. He had a feeling that the boy had done it on purpose when he bumped into him earlier. But why would he bump into him for no reason? Gu Linqi couldn't understand. All of this was reflected in Hua Jin's eyes. Uft. Was Yu jealous? Moreover, the way he was jealous was cute. Hua Jin felt an inexplicable sense of accomplishment. Chapter 4181. Chu Ho felt that there was no need to set up a new barbecue grill. She walked to Lin Xi's side and watched him carefully brush the oil over and over again. Her interest was piqued. Is it fun? Lin Xi nodded from the bottom of his heart. It's fun. The feeling of grilling barbecue by oneself was different from eating it ready-made. There was an inexplicable sense of accomplishment. Chu Ho also set up 2 skewers of octopus feet and started grilling them excitedly. Although the grilling time was not too long, Lin Xi had some experience. Chu Ho did not know how to grill, but he would still stand at the side and give pointers like an old man. Chu Ho laughed in her heart. This guy was too interesting. Actually, he was not that good at grilling, but he was here to give him pointers. He even acted as if he was good at it. However, Chu Ho was only criticizing him in her heart. On the surface, she showed her admiration for her son. Aya Lin Xi, you're really good. You've learned how to grill barbecue in such a short time. If we go camping in the future, I'll leave the difficult task of grilling barbecue to you. Gu Linqi smiled. No problem. He patted his chest as he taught Chu Ho how to sprinkle the seasonings. With the addition of cumin, salt, and pepper, a tempting aroma gradually spread. This strange aroma attracted all the little gluttonous bugs, especially Natalia and Yueyao. The 2 little guys smelled the aroma and surrounded Gu Linqi. The 2 of them were not very tall, so they had to tiptoe to see what he was cuffing. Gu Linqi had steak, oysters, scallops, and meat skewers in his hands. Natalia still had some self-control. However, Yueyao did not have any self-control at all. She just stared at the sizzling meat skewers without blinking. She looked like she was about to drool. Chu Ho looked at Yueyao's silly look and almost laughed. This little loli was really too cute. She stared blankly at Gu Linqi's actions as if she was frozen in place like a statue. Her eyes were dull but full of spirit, and her saliva was about to overflow from the corner of her mouth. However, although he looked silly, he was extremely adorable. She looked like a cute little penguin. Her small mouth was like a cherry, but it also seemed like it was made of sweet glutinous rice flour. In addition, saliva overflowed from her lips, giving her a crystal-clear feeling. He got closer and smelled her. There was a milky fragrance on her body. It was the most typical smell of a child. Chu Ho squatted in front of her and gently pulled her little hand. However, Yueyao didn't seem to be very cooperative. He even put his hands behind his back, as if he didn't want her to touch him. His eyes were still locked on Gu Linqi's body, full of yearning. Chu Ho couldn't help but ask Gu Linqi, "Are you done? I've been staring at you for a long time." Only then did Gu Linqi realize that the little guy was standing beside him. He saw Yueyao staring at him with his mouth slightly open, his eyes full of pleading. Chu Ho rebuked. "Did you just see it? I've been waiting with my mouth open for a long time." Gu Linqi asked, "What do you want to eat?" Yueyao didn't say anything. He opened his mouth and looked at him eagerly. Chapter 4182. For some reason, Gu Linqi suddenly had the urge to play a prank on her. He pretended to pinch a piece of meat, but in reality, there was nothing in his hands. It was just air, and he carefully brought it to Yueyao's mouth. Chu Ho saw this and immediately saw through Gu Linqi's little trick. There was nothing in his hands, but it was as if he was pinching something to feed her. This was obviously a lie. Did he think that Yueyao wouldn't see through it? In the end, Chu Ho was overthinking. Yueyao was only a few years old, so she was stunned by Lin Shi's trick. She saw Lin Shi bring a piece of meat to her mouth, but she didn't see it. She even moved her little mouth away. It's hot. Lin Shi couldn't stop laughing. How was it hot? This guy wasn't stupid at all. He knew that freshly baked food was hot. Or was it that he was already injured when he went to steal food from Yun Shishir's place, so he learned his lesson? Lin Shi pretended to blow gently, then said to Yueyao, "It's not cold anymore. Try it." Really? Yueyao still didn't believe him. After hesitating for a long time, she timidly opened her little mouth. Lin Shi fed her the meat. Yueyao didn't even look at it. She opened her little mouth and bit into a ball of air. In the end, Chuho didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Yueyao didn't even look at it and swallowed the ball of air whole. In the end, she didn't taste anything and looked puzzled. Lin Shi even asked seriously, "Is it good?" Yueyao answered honestly, "I can't taste it." Lin Shi coaxed her again. "I'll give you another piece of meat to try, okay?" Yueyao became excited. "I want to eat meat." She clenched her fists and looked expectant. Her eyes sparkled, which made Chuho feel a little sorry for her. Lin Shi grabbed another ball of air and brought it to her mouth. In the end, when she bit it, she still did not taste anything. She even chewed it seriously, but there was no taste at all. The confusion in her eyes grew even greater. Chuho couldn't take it anymore. "All right, stop teasing her. Look at how wrong she looks." Not to mention Chuho. Even Lin Shi himself couldn't bear it. He felt very guilty, so he finally picked up a small piece of real meat and put it in her mouth. The meat was an octopus foot. It was cut into small pieces and was very tender and springy. The Yueyao had just changed its teeth, so the octopus foot was a little hot. However, Lin Shi blew on it and it was much more comfortable. After eating a few pieces of octopus feet, Yueyao smelled the tantalizing aroma coming from the barbecue grill where Yu was standing. She ran over to him and looked up. Lin Shi looked at her and couldn't help but feel his heart soften. When his sister and brother grew up, they would definitely be as cute as Yueyao. When that time came, he would be a big brother. However, his sister was still too young now. She could only speak a little. He didn't know if she would be more like her father or her mother when she grew up. Chuho saw that he seemed to be thinking about something and couldn't help but ask, "What are you thinking about?" "Me." Lin Shi came back to his senses and looked at Yueyao's back. He said slowly, "I'm thinking that my sister will be as cute when she grows up. You must have been as cute when you were young. Everyone was cute when they were young." Chapter 4183. Hehe. I was thinking that no matter who she looked like, she would definitely be very beautiful. Chuho looked at Yueyao's back and muttered, "She looks more like Dad. What do you think?" "Yeah. If your sister looks more like Dad, she might be even prettier." Lin Shi disagreed. "Who said that? If she looks like Mom, she would definitely be very beautiful too. How can you be so sweet with your little mouth?" Chuho couldn't help but scratch the bridge of his nose. Halfway through the barbecue, Muyaja suddenly brought over a few boxes of fireworks. Xiao Yichen and Xiao Bao immediately got excited when they saw the fireworks. They didn't even care about the barbecue as they ran to the beach and circled around Muyaja. Muyaja quickly said, "Don't stand here. It's dangerous." "Humph, what's so dangerous about it?" Xiao Yichen didn't think much of it. He could even casually throw grenades around for fun. Mere fireworks wouldn't scare him. "Oh, then keep an eye on your brother. Don't let him get too close, or else he might get hurt." "Okay." Xiao Yichen immediately took Xiao Bao's hand and walked to the side. Xiao Bao still wanted to get closer, but Xiao Yichen held him back again. "Don't get too close." Xiao Bao, on the other hand, had an incredulous look on his face. "Why not? If there's a problem with the fireworks, it will splash on you and then you'll be in danger." After Xiao Yichen explained it this way, Xiao Bao understood. However, he still couldn't suppress his excitement. He looked at the fireworks expectantly and said happily, "Fireworks, fireworks." It was the first time the children had set off fireworks at the beach, so they were inexplicably excited. Muyaja studied it for a while. The wind at the beach was strong, so it would be difficult to light it with a lighter. Therefore, he used the old method. He lit a cigarette and confirmed that there were no children standing around. Then he lit the fuse with a spark and hurriedly retreated. 10 seconds later, with a whoosh, several meteors rose into the sky in a straight line and quickly disappeared into the night. There were a few more shio sounds, and the fireworks continued to rise into the sky, but they did not disperse as expected. Xiao Bao was surprised. Where are the fireworks? Natalia and Yueyao also looked around curiously. Generally speaking, when the fireworks rose into the air, they would definitely explode into several brilliant flowers, but now they couldn't see them. Just as the group of people looked at each other, there were a few walala sounds, and dozens of beautiful fireworks suddenly bloomed in the night sky. The falling sparks were like tassels, slowly spreading along the texture of the night sky. These were fireworks bought from a local Chinese vendor, and they were definitely of the highest quality. Therefore, the dazzling effect was indeed beyond Mu Yaja's expectations. He didn't set off fireworks at the beach, so this idea suddenly popped up in his mind. At that moment, the waves, the night breeze, the night sky, and the fireworks, it was a perfect match that couldn't be any more beautiful. Yin Shishir stared blankly at the dazzling fireworks in the night sky, and for a moment, she forgot where she was. Things that were so beautiful that it took one's breath away could always make one forget all their worries. She quietly watched the bursting fireworks. Half of the night sky was almost dyed bright by the brilliant fireworks. It's so beautiful, so beautiful. Xiao Bao clapped his hands in excitement. Chapter 4184. Hence, even though the fireworks were over, he still wanted more. Is there more? He looked at Mu Yaja expectantly, his eyes full of anticipation. There's more. Mu Yaja continued. But there's something in the villa's storage unit. Are you willing to move it with me? Of course. Xiao Bao mustered up his courage and asked, Can I light the fireworks myself? No. Mu Yaja rejected him without hesitation. Xiao Bao's face fell when he heard this. He was disappointed. Why? Because you're still too young. Mu Yaja gave him this reason. Xiao Bao was even more disappointed when he heard this. He said indignantly, I'm not young anymore. I'm all grown up. Ha ha ha. Mu Yaja laughed when he heard this. How old are you? Xiao Bao didn't know how old he was, but he seriously counted with his fingers. Gu Jinglian stood at the side and looked at his son's mature appearance. He was furious. Didn't I teach you how to count? Xiao Bao scratched the back of his head awkwardly and said helplessly, I've forgotten how old I am. Ha ha ha. Xiao Yichen couldn't help but laugh when he heard this. Xiao Bao thought that he was laughing at him. He was so angry that he dodged and shouted. Don't shout. Mu Yaja added. You still have the cheek to laugh? When you were my age, you couldn't even do basic arithmetic. Xiao Yichen couldn't laugh anymore when he saw that his father was undermining him. He smiled awkwardly and turned his head away. His father? Was he really his father? Was there a father who would undermine him like this? Xiao Yichen was very unhappy. He stood gloomily at the side and looked at Mu Yaja with resentment. Mu Yaja couldn't be bothered with him and said, I'll go get a few boxes of fireworks. You guys wait here. Okay. Mu Yaja went back to the storage unit and brought a few boxes of fireworks over. This time, Xiao Yichen said that he wanted to set them off. Mu Yaja couldn't be at ease with him, so he passed the cigarette butt to him and held Xiao Bao's hand as they walked to the side. However, Xiao Bao was unhappy. He pouted and said reluctantly, Why can he put it down but I can't play? A little Yichen laughed. I'm older than you, so I can set off fireworks. After hearing him say this, Xiao suddenly had an inexplicable longing. It's good to be older. I want to grow up too. Next to him, a man who had already grown up said faintly, When you grow up, you'll feel that being young is true happiness. Xiao Bao looked at Mu Yaja, who was sighing with emotion, and corrected him seriously. I don't think you've grown up. Oh? What's that? You're an elder. Mu Yaja's face froze and turned slightly pale. Ha 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 ha. Xiao Yichen laughed out loud when he heard this. Daddy, he said you're old. Mu Yaja grunted and didn't deny it. I'm old. He wasn't an immortal who had to go through this path. Move aside. Xiao Yichen warned Xiao Bao. I'm going to set off the fireworks. Don't come near. Oh. Xiaobao stepped back and looked at him with admiration and envy. He thought that when he grew up he could set off fireworks like Xiaoyi Chen. That was great. Chapter 4185. Cheers. Yin Shishir raised her glass and smiled. Her face was slightly red and it was obvious that she was tipsy. She looked at Chu Ho and Gu Jinglian and smiled. Are you guys making up for your honeymoon? You guys have to enjoy yourselves this time. Gu Jinglian smiled and exchanged glances with Chu Ho. Then he raised his hand and clinked his wine glass against Chu Ho's. Mu Yaja and Hua Jin also raised their wine glasses. With a few clinks, the wine glasses clinked against each other elegantly. For some reason, Gu Jinglian, who was arrogant, would not have put down his pride and sat down to have a drink. However, no one knew what Yin Shishir said to Gu Jinglian when she walked over, but for some reason, Gu Jinglian smiled. Then they sat down and had a drink together. Hua Jin sighed to himself. Why was Yin Shishir able to make people so happy? Unknowingly, the night gradually darkened. Gu Linqi carried Xiaobao back to sleep. Natalia and Yueyao were also sleepy. Xiao Yichen carried Yueyao back to sleep. Yu and Natalia also returned to the villa early. The entire beach seemed to be quiet all of a sudden. Only the sound of the sea breeze could be heard. Listening to the sound of the waves crashing against the shore, and feeling the gentle sea breeze on their skin, they couldn't help but enjoy it. Yin Shishir said, I haven't enjoyed myself like this in a long time. Chu Ho was puzzled when he heard this. Now that you're not filming, you should have a lot of time to go on vacation. How is that possible? Yin Shishir said helplessly. Yueyao is still young. I don't feel at ease leaving her alone on vacation. Now that she's a little older, I'm afraid that she won't be able to acclimatize to a place so far away. Children her age are very precious to their health. When Chu Ho heard this, he said half-jokingly, most of the children these days are precious. At that time, when we were young, we never had such a good life. Yes. Chu Ho was immersed in his memories. I remember when I was young, the dual family where I was born was in a state of war. There was constant internal strife, and the streets were filled with demonstrations and protests. There were also many military forces exchanging fire. I remember that in order to fill my stomach, I hid from those people and ate bread from the mud. Some of it was spoiled, but in order to fill my stomach, I did not care so much. Even if he ate like that, he didn't get sick. If he were to eat like that, how could the children of today survive? Yin Shishir did not think much of it though. I can only say that your physique is good. Everyone's physique is different. In fact, many children in that era died prematurely due to malnutrition or poor soil conditions. It was just that no one knew about it. Now that the days were better, such things happen less often. However, the children in those poor areas still find it hard to eat and wear. Therefore, after Yin Shishir got married, she reduced her work. However, she focused more on charity work. There was once when Yin Shishir participated in a charity event and learned that 1,500 yuan a year could be used to fund a poor student's living expenses and tuition fees for a year. Hence, she decided to help 3,000 poor students in one go. Many reporters thought that she was hypocritical and was doing it for the sake of the Xingyu Financial Group's reputation. However, this was Yin Shishir's true thoughts. Chapter 4186. The five of them were enjoying the sea breeze as they chatted with each other. There was no deliberate attempt to find topics to talk about or maintain the atmosphere. Everyone was enjoying the sea breeze and quietly enjoying the tranquility of the night. Perhaps this was a vacation in the truest sense of the word. The five of them drank quietly as they enjoyed the sea breeze. They only dispersed when it was very late. Yin Shishir wanted to go paragliding on the sea. Chu Ho wanted to go snorkeling. Hence, the two of them agreed to meet at the beach early the next morning. Hence, Yin Shishir woke up early in the morning excitedly. She applied sunscreen, changed into her swimsuit, and went to the beach. Chu Ho was already there waiting for her. Yin Shishir was surprised that Chu Ho had woken up earlier than her. Chu Ho said, I woke up early in the morning. Why so early? It's my first time watching the sunrise at the beach. Sunrise? When Yin Shishir heard that, she was instantly envious. How could she have forgotten? Yin Shishir said a little reproachfully, Why didn't you wake me up? I don't have your cell phone number. If I knocked on your door early in the morning, it would be so awkward if I saw you guys doing morning exercises. Chu-ho was a straightforward person, so he said what he wanted to say. Yin Shirshir blushed and said, "Hey, don't talk nonsense. What's wrong with that?" Chu-ho stood up and said, "The coach will be here soon. We'll just wait here for a while." Yin Shirshir looked at her body. Suddenly, she saw that she was wearing a one-piece swimsuit and was wrapped up tightly. She was a little surprised. Why are you wearing so much?" Chu-ho said, What's the matter? Is there a problem with the swimsuit? You have such a good figure. Don't you think it's a pity to wear so much?" As she said that, Yin Shirshir said to Chu-ho, "I have another swimsuit. It's new and I haven't worn it before. Do you want to try it?" "It's okay. Mine is pretty good. Just give it a try. I've never seen you bare your body before." Ignoring Chu-ho's refusal, Yin Shirshir took her hand and walked towards the villa. When she returned to the villa, she opened the new packaging in front of Chu-ho and took out a swimsuit. Chu-ho saw that it was a floral design. Broken flower? She hesitated. Yin Shirshir nodded. "That's right. This one is very feminine. It's very pretty. I really liked them, so I bought a lot of them in one go. Would you like to give it a try?" Chu-ho shook his head. "No, this dress doesn't suit me." The swimsuit she was wearing was pure black. She only liked this kind of plain style. This kind of floral series felt too girly. Chu-ho shook his head. "I don't think it's suitable." As Yin Shirshir reached out to lift her clothes, she nagged, "You have such a good figure. Wouldn't it be a pity if you don't show it?" As she said that, she lifted her clothes. The moment she saw the firm lines of her abdomen, she was shocked. Seeing her expression, Chu-ho also felt uneasy. "What's the matter?" "Oh my God! Is this your vest line?" Chu-ho was stunned. "I guess so. Didn't you give birth to 3 children?" "Yeah." "Then," Yin Shirshir said in a daze, "how did you recover so quickly?" Chapter 4187. Chu-ho thought for a moment and recalled. "I remember that there was always a vest. Even though I was 9 months pregnant, the vest could still be seen very clearly." Yin Shirshir asked weakly, "Do you exercise regularly?" "No." "Then, how did you maintain your figure?" Chu-ho said, "I don't have much fat or excess flesh on my body, only muscles." Comparisons were odious. Yin Shirshir suddenly remembered that she still had a swimsuit. She rummaged through the drawers and finally found the swimsuit that she liked from the bottom of the drawer. It was white and didn't have too many colors. However, it was very simple. However, it was much sexier than the one that Chu-ho was wearing. "Try this one," Yin Shirshir said with certainty. "This one will definitely suit you better than the one you're wearing now." "Let's not." "Don't you trust my taste?" Yin Shirshir complained. "I think this one will definitely suit you. Try it on." Chu-ho couldn't stop her from pestering him. Hence, he took the swimsuit and walked into the room. A few minutes later, the door opened again. When Chu-ho walked out in a swimsuit, Yin Shirshir was so shocked that her eyes almost popped out. Oh my God. As this swimsuit was a sexier style, there wasn't much fabric, and it just happened to cover the areas that needed to be covered. Hence, Chu-ho's perfect muscles were fully displayed. Besides the vest, the most important thing was that Chu-ho really didn't have any excess flesh on his body. It was all muscle. The most important thing was that his muscles didn't look bloated. Instead, they had a very fine line, especially his Apollo's belt, which was partially visible. As he walked, every line of his muscles made one feel suffocated with envy. Chu-ho felt a little uncomfortable being stared at by her. She put her hands on her shoulders to protect herself. To her, this swimsuit seemed too revealing. Yin Shirshir slapped her hand away. "Don't block it. Why don't you show off your figure? Like me, if I had such a good figure, I would wake up laughing in my dreams." Chu-ho frowned and asked, "Is there a mirror?" "What happened? Why do I feel like my butt is completely exposed?" For some reason, Chu-ho felt like he was running around naked. Yin Shirshir said helplessly, "Of course not." She pushed her in front of the mirror. When Chu-ho saw herself in the mirror, she was shocked. Yin Shirshir muttered behind her, "You're a woman. Isn't it natural for women to love beauty?" I always feel that your personality is too masculine, so you always dress very neutrally. Actually, this is called sexy, not revealing. Is that so? You'll be fine once you get used to it. At first, Chuho was a little embarrassed to go out. Yin Shirshir took her hand and pulled her out of the door. At that moment, Gu Jinglian had just walked to the beach. He had just laid out a mat and was about to lie down to bask in the sun. In the end, Yin Shirshir took Chuho's hand and walked to the beach. Gu Jinglian caught a glimpse of them from the corner of his eye. He was so shocked that his sunglasses were crooked. He sat up abruptly and looked over. Only when he confirmed that the woman in front of him was indeed his wife, Chuho, did he believe that this sexily dressed woman was his wife. Why was she dressed like that? Gu Jinglian's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. Chapter 4188. Chuho obviously did not notice his presence. At this moment, the coach in charge of the paragliding project had already arrived and was waiting patiently. When he saw Yin Shirshir and Chuho rushing over, the coach took one look and could not look away. Especially when he saw Chuho's slender figure and sexy figure. He could not even catch his breath. Although Chuho did not deliberately train after giving birth, her foundation was still there. She had been training since she was young, so her figure had always been very good. Therefore, even if she did not deliberately train, her figure was definitely much better than those women who trained in the gym. Compared to the intensity of her previous training, the gym was purely child's play. Until Yin Shirshir glared at him. Coach, can we start? Oh. The coach came back to his senses and immediately said in broken Chinese, Okay, you're always staring at her. Don't stare a hole in her body. The coach felt even more guilty. However, because of the sun all year round, his tan skin did not show any signs of blushing. Yin Shirshir secretly said to Chuho, Look, you're dressed so sexy. She can't take her eyes off you. Chuho laughed helplessly. She looked at Yin Shirshir and her heart was filled with emotions. Other than Meng Qingxue, she did not seem to have any other female friends. Because she had grown up in a transcendent environment, she had a very masculine personality. She was straightforward and did not stick to the rules. Therefore, it was very difficult for her to get along with delicate female friends. However, Yin Shirshir seemed to get along well with her. Yin Shirshir's personality was very gentle. If one were to use an idiom to describe it, it would probably be that she was the kind of person who was tolerant of everything. No matter what personality someone had, she could always get along well with them. And to meet such a gentle friend, Chuho also cherished it very much. The coach asked, Who's going first? Chuho immediately said, I'll do it. She wasn't sure if the project was safe. Moreover, she could tell that Yin Shirshir was a little scared and guilty because it was a high-altitude project. So she took the initiative to suggest that she give it a try. The coach took out the safety suit and life jacket and taught Chuho how to put them on. Chuho was experienced, so he could put them on himself. The coach tied the rope around his body. In order to ensure her safety, Chuho grabbed both ends of the rope and struggled with all her might. With the strength of her arms, she could confirm that this rope was truly safe. The coach said, When I tell you to run, start running. Do you understand? Yes, I understand. Chuho was well trained, so he answered very well and confidently. The coach held the radio and commanded the yacht to move. The rope was slowly pulled into the sea. When most of the rope was pulled into the sea, the coach shouted, Run! Run! Chuho gripped the safety buckle tightly and wanted to run into the sea. When she stepped on the water, the sea breeze suddenly rushed over. Accompanied by the huge dragging force of the yacht, Chuho only felt that her feet suddenly left the ground. Her whole body was pulled up by the umbrella, and she flew high up into the sky. Actually, it was not considered high up in the sky. Compared to parachuting from thousands of meters in the sky during missions in the past, these tens of meters were not considered high at all. However, Chuho still heard Yin Shirshir's exclamation. Wow! It's so high! Chapter 4189. Wow! It's so high! Then she couldn't hear anything else. The wind on the sea was strong. Without any shelter, the umbrella floated higher and higher with the sea breeze. The yacht towed the umbrella, and Chuho looked relaxed. With the sea breeze blowing and high up in the sky, Chuho didn't feel nervous at all. Instead, She felt free. She still remembered the first time she parachuted. She stood on the helicopter and looked down at the sky. Even though she pretended to be calm, she still felt uneasy and nervous. Parachuting wasn't 100% safe. The accident rate was also very high. Especially for newbies, if they didn't grasp the essentials, it was easy to fail the parachuting. Even if there were no accidents, they could still get injured. Not to mention other things, just the state of mind when facing such a high altitude was definitely something that ordinary people could understand. Yin Shirshir stood by the sea and watched. Gu Jinglian walked over and looked at Chu Ho, who had drifted far away. He asked blankly, "What's that?" "That's an airship pulling an umbrella." Yin Shirshir said nervously, "Why do I feel a little scared? It feels very high. Chu Ho has already flown so far away. I wonder if she's scared?" Gu Jinglian heard this and glanced at her disapprovingly. "Scared? What's there to be scared of? She won't be scared. She's so brave." Yin Shirshir sighed from the bottom of her heart. She had seen many brave people, but she had never seen someone like Chu Ho, who was fearless in the face of any hardship. She was even braver than most men. 10 minutes later, Yin Shirshir saw from afar that the umbrella was slowly descending on the sea. Chu Ho fell into the sea, but because of the life jacket, she floated on the sea. The coach went down the ladder and reached out to pull her. However, Chu Ho didn't grab his hand. She climbed onto the speedboat by herself easily. Soon, the speedboat flew toward the coast. Yin Shirshir and Gu Jinglian heard the sound of the speedboat and looked over. They saw Chu Ho standing on the speedboat and giving Yin Shirshir a thumbs up. "Great. You must try it." When Yin Shirshir heard this, she looked at the high altitude where Chu Ho had flown. However, she still had some lingering fears. "Isn't it too high? That's impossible." Compared to parachuting, this height was already very friendly. Because it was a commoner entertainment project, the height was within the range of ordinary people. Chu Ho said to her, "At this height, I don't have to wear a safety suit. I can grab the safety buckle with my hands." The parachute had a safety clasp that needed to be held with both hands, but most people didn't have such a strong grip. When the coach heard this, he didn't think much of it. "How is that possible? You won't be able to hold it at such a high altitude. If you fall from tens of meters to the sea, it'll be no different from falling from a tall building." Yin Shirshir laughed and said, "Chu Ho, that's too dangerous." "It's true," Chu Ho said seriously. "When I used to practice parachuting, I was still a new recruit. There was once when my safety suit wasn't buckled properly, and I fell in mid-air. I only landed safely by holding onto the safety clasp." When the coach heard this, he was shocked. Chapter 4190. If she wanted to make it to the ground, not only would she need an amazing arm strength, she would also need an amazing grip. This was something that even the top Special Forces soldiers would find difficult to achieve. How could a woman like her do it? Moreover, he had never seen a woman skydiving before. The coach thought that skydiving was Chu Ho's personal hobby, so he said, "Amateur skydiving is different from this. It's not amateur." As Chu Ho said this, he turned to Yin Shirshir and said, "Don't worry. As long as the safety measures are taken, you will be able to take off and land safely." The coach still didn't believe him. Instead, he said provocatively, "I don't believe you just because you say so. If you're so capable, why don't you try it?" Before Chu He could react, Gu Jinglian glared at him coldly, exuding a sharp aura. How dare he provoke him? The coach caught a glimpse of Gu Jinglian's sharp gaze and jumped in shock. He was slightly intimidated by his gaze. However, Chu Ho said, "Why should I try it? Why did she have to do meaningless things and take unnecessary risks for the sake of being brave? There was no need." The coach also felt that it was pointless. He said resentfully in decent Chinese, Come on, come on. Next." He picked up the life jacket and gestured at Yin Shirshir. Yin Shirshir was about to walk over when Chu Ho reached out and said to the coach, "Let me put it on for her." Earlier, the coach had secretly groped Chu Ho's chest when she wasn't paying attention. Fortunately, she reacted in time and blocked his hand. Fortunately, Gu Jinglian didn't see this. Otherwise, this man's hand would have been broken. Chu Ho was worried that Yin Shirshir would be taken advantage of. So she snatched the life jacket from his hand and said to Yun Shirshir, "I'll put it on for you." The coach saw this and became worried. "No, you're not professional. If you don't do it well, it will be dangerous. I know this better than you. I'm the coach. I'm responsible for your safety." The coach did not dare to take the risk. He had signed an agreement with the hotel. If the tourists who played the game in his hands were in danger, he would face the risk of going to jail. Chu-ho glared at him and said, "I said you don't have to be responsible, so you don't have to be responsible." With that, she turned around and said to Yun Shirshir, "Do you believe me or her?" Chu-ho thought that Yun Shirshir would more or less hesitate, but Yun Shirshir said without hesitation, "Of course I believe you." When Chu-ho heard this, he was slightly taken aback. Then he smiled in relief. There was a feeling of being trusted. It was a good feeling. The coach was still a little reluctant. He did not know what Chu-ho had done in the past or what he had experienced, so he did not believe him at all. Gu Jinglian, on the other hand, was impatient. He knew that this work was child's play to Chu-ho. Chu-ho was so insistent on taking safety measures for Yun Shirshir, so it must be for her safety. Hence, he waved at the coach impatiently and said, "I told you to get lost. Don't interfere and stop talking nonsense." The coach was intimidated by Gu Jinglian's authority, so he did not dare to rebut him. However, he still emphasized, "You have to be responsible for all the consequences of your actions." With that, he walked onto the yacht and tidied up the ropes. Chapter 4191. Chu-ho looked up in surprise. She didn't know how she had seen through her kind intentions. Yun Shirshir glanced at the coach and said helplessly, "I saw him trying to take advantage of you just now, but you blocked him, right?" She knew at a glance what Chu-ho was thinking. She was afraid that she would be harassed by the coach. However, Chu-ho was more reserved and reserved. She always did things quietly and didn't like to flaunt herself. Yun Shirshir was touched. Chu-ho said quietly, "It's okay now. I've checked. It's tied up very well." With that, she retreated to the side and told Yun Shirshir, "When I say 3, 2, 1, and you hear 1, start running. Don't care about anything else, just run. Do you understand?" Yun Shirshir nodded seriously. "I understand." Chu-ho gestured to the coach. The coach started the yacht and drove away. The rope was slowly dragged into the sea. Chu-ho looked at the rope being dragged into the sea and started counting. 3, 2, 1, run, run. Yun Shirshir immediately followed Chu-ho's instructions and ran with all her might. Because she had to hold the paraglider, she didn't have as much strength as Chu-ho. It was a little strenuous for her to run. When she stepped into the sea, she suddenly felt her body float up like a hydrogen balloon. She screamed in shock and immediately felt herself flying into the sky. Yun Shirshir was so scared that her face turned pale. She closed her eyes and didn't dare to look anymore. Chu-ho said loudly, "Open your eyes. Look." Then, as the water gradually rose, Yun Shirshir could no longer hear Chu-ho's voice. Finally, she gathered her courage and opened her eyes. When she lowered her head again, she saw that there was a vast ocean beneath her feet. The speedboat broke through the waves and the sea breeze blew the paraglider higher and higher. Her body swayed along with the paraglider. Then she saw the beautiful horizon in the distance. The horizon and the sea seemed to have fused together perfectly. She couldn't even tell with her naked eyes which line was the sea and which line was the horizon. Turning his head, he saw that on another public beach, the yachts, the beach chairs, and the tourists were gradually becoming smaller and smaller. The paraglider took her to the public waters. When the tourists below saw her, they shouted and whistled excitedly. They were extremely excited. Wow. Yun Shirshir took a small breath and finally exhaled the turbid air that was stuck in her chest. What followed was an unprecedented relief. Although the safety rope was somewhat strangling her, it gave her a great sense of security. "Ah!" she shouted loudly, as if she was venting, as if she was cheering him on. However, his voice was quickly shattered by the sea breeze. It was her first time trying such a high-altitude project, so she was both excited and nervous. She followed Chu-ho's instructions and held the safety lock tightly. Her whole body relaxed, and she floated freely above the sea with the parachute. 10 minutes later, the speedboat reached the shore. Yin Shirshir wore a life jacket and jumped down from the speedboat. She stepped on the water and returned to the shore. Chu-ho came up to her and asked gently, "How was the experience? Was it fun?" "It was fun." Chapter 4192. Chu-ho interrupted her. "But you did very well." Yin Shirshir's eyes lit up. "Really?" "Yes." "Phew, that's good." Yin Shirshir patted her chest, still feeling a little scared. "Actually, I'm a little afraid of heights." "Afraid of heights?" Chu-ho scratched his head. He couldn't understand what a fear of heights was. This was because she had never been afraid of heights before. The first time she faced such a high altitude was standing on a helicopter. Facing a height of 2,000 meters, she was about to jump down. No one knew if there would be an accident. No one knew if she would survive. Yin Shirshir still wanted to continue playing. At this moment, Xiao Yichen suddenly ran over anxiously. "Mommy, bad news." Yin Shirshir saw his anxious expression and felt a little uneasy. She immediately walked over and asked, "What's wrong?" "Natalia has a fever." Yin Shirshir went to Natalia's room. In the huge room, Natalia lay weakly on the bed. The air conditioner wasn't on, and she was even wrapped in a thick blanket. Yu sat quietly by the bed. When he heard footsteps, he immediately stood up and looked at Yin Shirshir. "Mommy. What's wrong with her?" Yin Shirshir walked to the bed and stretched out her hand. She saw a glass of water and a few pills on the bedside table. They seemed to be the fever medicine he had brought over. "What's wrong with her?" Yu frowned and said. "She seemed to be feeling unwell this morning. She has been lying in bed and can't get up." Uncle Huajin was a little worried and took her temperature. He found out that she had a fever of 39.8 degrees. 39.8 degrees. Such a high fever? That was quite a high temperature. Children weren't like adults. This temperature was already very serious. Yu continued. Uncle Huajin said that he might have gotten a fever because he was exposed to the sea breeze for too long last night. Natalia doesn't seem to have a good constitution. She gets sick easily, so she's probably suffering from the cold. How could this be? Yin Shirshir frowned. Yueyao was younger than Natalia. Even Yueyao was fine. Why did Natalia have a fever? Moreover, the sea breeze on the beach last night was not that strong. Moreover, the weather here was so hot. How could he have a fever for no reason? Originally, I wanted to give her some fever medicine, but I don't know why she has a fever. I can't give her medicine recklessly. So, let's go to town to buy some fever patches first. If the fever patches don't work, we'll go to the hospital. In the small town of Saipan, there was only a simple medical center. A proper hospital required a long drive to the center. Huajin thought that he would first use the fever patch and take some medicine to observe the situation. If he got better, then he wouldn't need to go to the hospital. The hospital was not a good place. Natalia didn't like it. It could even be said that she was repulsed by it. Huajin initially wanted to take Natalia to the hospital, but when the groggy Natalia heard that they were going to the hospital, she reluctantly kicked off the blanket in protest. She refused to get out of bed and follow Huajin to the hospital. Hence, Huajin coaxed her to take her medicine first and put on a fever patch instead of going to the hospital. Only then did she behave herself. Not long after, Huajin rushed back with fever patches and fever medicine for children from the medical center. Chapter 4193. He read the manual seriously, but couldn't understand it no matter how hard he tried. Yin Shirshir panicked when she saw this. She immediately rushed forward and took the medicine box from Huajin's hands. She tore off the film of the fever patch and gently placed it on Natalia's forehead. She looked at the manual and took out 2 pills according to the amount. Huajin immediately understood. 2 pills at a time? Yeah. Let's take a day's worth of medicine first. Do you want to go to the hospital? Huajin was a little worried. Yin Shirshir said helplessly. If you go to the hospital, you'll need to make an appointment if it's not a serious illness. I've already made an appointment. If you don't get better by tonight, we'll send you to the hospital. Huajin was about to nod when a weak and uneasy voice came from behind them. I don't want to go to the hospital. Hearing this, everyone immediately turned their heads towards the source of the voice, only to see Natalia weakly sitting up from the bed and glaring at them fiercely. I don't want to go to the hospital. Her voice was weak, but her tone was firm. Huajin immediately walked to the bedside and hugged her shoulders tenderly. He comforted her. Why don't you go to the hospital? We don't need injections, but if you don't feel well, you won't be able to go to the beach to play, right? When she heard that they were going to the beach, Natalia's originally gloomy eyes brightened a little. She looked at Huajin expectantly and mumbled, I want to go to the beach to play. When they came, Huajin had bought Natalia a cute life buoy and a beautiful swimsuit. He even said that he would take her on a yacht. If she continued to be sick, they wouldn't be able to go to the beach to play. Thus, Natalia started to hesitate. When Yin Shirshir saw this, she squatted by the bed and looked at her seriously. She asked curiously, Why don't you want to go to the hospital? Natalia was silent for a long time. She turned her face away but didn't want to say anything. When Huajin saw this, he immediately said sternly, Natalia, no matter who is talking to you, you have to look at them, okay? This is respect and courtesy. Yin Shirshir smiled helplessly. She's already sick. Why are you still talking about this? Yu and Xiao Yichen looked at each other and immediately walked over. They said worriedly, Natalia, let's go to the hospital. Hurry up and get better. Then we can go out to sea and play together. That's right. Didn't we agree to go snorkeling tomorrow? If you're sick, how are you going to go? If it weren't for you, we would be very bored. Natalia hesitated for a long time before she said in a lonely voice, Natalia suddenly said something that sent chills down everyone's spines. My sister said she doesn't want to go. Yin Shirshir and Huajin looked at each other and were stunned. At the airport, Alice hurriedly took a taxi and rushed to the private beach. The taxi stopped at the entrance and she hurriedly paid the bill. At the same time, Yin Shirshir had been waiting at the entrance for a long time. Earlier, Yin Shirshir had asked Alice to come to Saipan for a vacation. Also, Alice wanted to observe Natalia's condition. However, when the plane landed, she received a call from Yin Shirshir saying that something had happened to Natalia. Chapter 4194. By this time, Natalia had already taken the medicine under Huajin's patient persuasion. As the medicine took effect, she went to bed early to rest. The moment Alice entered the villa, she saw Huajin sitting by the bed with a solemn look on his face. He was looking at Natalia with heartache. What happened? Alice put her hands in the pockets of her windbreaker and walked to the bed. She glanced at Natalia and frowned slightly. What's wrong with her? Shoo. Huajin gestured to the door and mouthed to Natalia, She's asleep. Let's talk outside. Alice nodded, turned around, and walked out the door. Huajin asked Yu and Xiao Yichen to look after Natalia in the room. He then followed Alice to the door. Alice lit a cigarette and stood by the bed. She asked quietly, Something happened to her, right? Huajin nodded silently and sat down on the sofa. He asked hesitantly, Does Natalia have an older sister? Alice turned around abruptly and narrowed her eyes suspiciously. Older sister? Yes. She said her older sister's name is Natalia. Natalia? Alice's face suddenly turned serious. She looked at Huajin. For a moment, her mind was filled with thousands of thoughts. She wanted to say something but stopped herself. Yin Shirshir poured 2 cups of tea and walked over to them. She looked at Alice and said hesitantly, Alice, we seem to have discovered Natalia's second personality. However, we found something troublesome. What troublesome thing? Yin Shirshir looked at Huajin. Huajin stood up, opened a drawer in the cabinet, and took out a crystal ball. When Alice saw the crystal ball, she was shocked. Huajin had mentioned the crystal ball to her before. When she saw the real thing, she was even more certain that this crystal ball was definitely an auxiliary tool used by hypnotists. Alice asked in surprise, Did you steal this from Natalia? That day when we were on the trip, I was packing my luggage, but she kept holding this crystal ball silently. I asked her to let me keep it for her, but she didn't seem willing. However, when I checked in my luggage, because it was a fragile item, it needed to be checked in. So I had an excuse to keep the crystal ball in my luggage. When we arrived in Saipan, I lied to her and told her that I accidentally lost the crystal ball when I checked it in. Upon hearing this, Alice asked suspiciously, Is she sad? No. That is, she was very anxious and restless. She didn't sleep well the whole night. Alice frowned slightly. She felt that there was something fishy about this. Hua Jin said seriously, I observed for a while. I found that besides being inseparable from the crystal ball, Natalia has a more obvious characteristic. What characteristic? That is, she can't leave the crystal ball. Otherwise, in addition to being anxious, she will also have trouble sleeping and eating. Last night, she fell asleep very late. When she woke up in the morning, I found that she suddenly had a fever. Fever? Yes, Hua Jin said again. More than 39 degrees. So high? I asked the family doctor to come over, but he said that it was just a superficial fever. A superficial fever? Yun Shirshir was also surprised to hear the term body surface fever. Chapter 4195. Surface fever, as the name suggested, was measured based on the surface of the body. The temperature of the forehead or armpit was definitely above normal, but the temperature of the tongue was within the normal range. Therefore, a fever on the surface of the body was definitely an abnormal phenomenon. This temperature was not normal at all. In other words, there was absolutely no problem with her physiological temperature. Surface fever was mainly due to a lack of blood and qi. Insufficient blood and qi caused the metabolism of the blood to slow down. The low temperature caused the blood vessels to contract and the blood flow to weaken. At the same time, it could also be due to the poor blood circulation in the brain. It could also be due to excessive fatigue or excessive toxins in the body. In other words, poor sleep quality was the main reason. Poor sleep quality, Hua Jin said. I lied to her that I lost the crystal ball. I could see that she was very depressed. She usually hugs the crystal ball to sleep, so I suspect that there is definitely something wrong with the crystal ball. Because he suspected that there was something wrong with the crystal ball, Hua Jin wanted to give the crystal ball to Alice to study. Alice took the crystal ball and observed it for a while. She came to a conclusion. I guess that the crystal ball is the main reason for her fever. Why? This is probably just a guess, but I think that if there are no unexpected circumstances, this guess is enough to be valid. What do you mean? You said that she usually hugs the crystal ball to sleep, but for the past few days, you hid the crystal ball and did not give it to her, right? Hua Jin nodded. Then, I guess that the other personality probably caused a psychological suggestion to the main personality. This psychological suggestion was guided by the crystal ball. The crystal ball is an important tool for hypnosis, so perhaps Natalia's main personality is being controlled by the second personality, and the second personality is using the crystal ball to control her. Hua Jin could not help but gasp when he heard this. The more he thought about it, the more terrified he became. He suddenly remembered that there was a gap in his memory some time ago. At first, he did not notice anything unusual. He thought that he must have been too tired, or that his memory had deteriorated as he grew older. However, when he thought about it later, he realized that his memory had always been very good, especially when it came to memorizing scripts. He always memorized them very quickly and firmly. Later, when he found the crystal ball in Natalia's room, he began to suspect that he had been hypnotized by the crystal ball. He didn't know why, but he could vaguely see the shadow of another Natalia in Natalia. Sometimes he would feel that Natalia was both unfamiliar and familiar at the same time. He felt like he had seen him somewhere before, but he couldn't remember where. It was like amnesia. Alice came to a conclusion. I'm guessing that Natalia's other personality came out before this. However, that personality might know hypnotism and used it on you to erase your short memories. Hypnosis. When Yun Shirshir heard this, she immediately asked nervously, what are the symptoms after hypnosis? Chapter 4196. Some people will faint. Some people will feel very sleepy and want to sleep. Moreover, they will sleep very deeply and won't wake up no matter what. Yun Shirshir let out a short, and her expression changed. She suddenly remembered that day. In order to fulfill Yu Yu's promise to Natalia, Gong Fan had personally made the dessert table. However, he suddenly fainted. When he woke up, he said that he was very sleepy. She hugged him and coaxed him to sleep. However, he had not woken up until now. He had not seen Gong Fan for a very, very long time. When Yun Shirshir thought of this, Her heart felt like it was being stabbed by a knife. Alice saw that Yun Shirshir's expression was ugly and asked worriedly, "What's wrong? Why do you suddenly look so pale?" Does that mean that Gong Fan was also hypnotized by Natalia's other personality? When Alice heard this, her expression froze. What do you mean? Yun Shirshir immediately recounted what had happened that day to Alice in detail, excluding the cause and effect of the incident. When Alice heard this, her eyes flickered and her expression became very serious. When Yun Shirshir saw that Alice's expression did not look good, she also felt worried. Actually, I have no way of knowing why Gong Fan hasn't woken up until now. I'm so afraid that he has disappeared from Yu Yu's body. However, I can't ask and I can't see. I can only live in fear every day. There's nothing I can do. However, just as you said, I thought about it carefully. Indeed, on the day that Gong Fan had a problem, Natalia was also there. The symptoms basically match what you said. I'm pregnant. Could he have been hypnotized by Natalia? It's not Natalia, Huajin suddenly said. Yun Shirshir looked at Huajin and heard Huajin say, "Perhaps it's Natalia. Natalia would never do such a thing." You don't know her well. No. Huajin's attitude was firm. It can't be Natalia. Otherwise, why didn't Natalia hypnotize me? Everyone fell silent. Alice always felt that there was something fishy about this matter, but she couldn't figure out what exactly it was. Her thoughts were in a mess. There seemed to be a flash of inspiration in her mind, but she couldn't grasp it. Gong Fan has never woken up since then? Alice asked again. Yun Shirshir nodded solemnly, her voice trembling. I miss him very much. For a long time, she suppressed her emotions and did not want to show them in front of Yu Yu and Muyaja. But she was also worried. Even though she kept comforting herself that it would be good for Yu Yu if Gong Fan's personality disappeared. Was this not what she had been most happy to see in the past? However, no matter how much she comforted herself, she couldn't convince herself otherwise. She was afraid that her indecisiveness would hurt Yu Yu. Could Gong Fan have disappeared? Yun Shirshir looked at Alice with reddened eyes, like a person in distress and despair. Alice stared fixedly at Yun Shirshir with furrowed brows, not knowing how to answer her question. She pretended to be calm, but deep down, she didn't know what had happened to Gong Fan. Chapter 4197. Separated by a door, Yu Yu stood in the room. Through the gap between the door and the door, he silently watched the dazed Yun Shirshir in the living room. His fingers trembled slightly. Yu Yu took a deep breath and turned around. He leaned against the door gently, his eyes filled with heartache. Gong Fan had indeed disappeared for a long time, but he didn't know why he had disappeared. However, he didn't know that his mommy was so worried about Gong Fan. She was probably afraid that he would be sad. She was afraid that he would think that her love for him was divided into two parts. One part belonged to him, and the other part belonged to Gong Fan. Hence, she pretended to be calm, as if she wasn't that worried. Actually, she should be very worried. Yu Yu knew that his mommy had feelings for Gong Fan. He even noticed that during this period of time, every morning when she woke up and rushed into the room, she would see him. The dejection in her eyes couldn't deceive anyone. Yu Yu closed his eyes and muttered, "Gong Fan, where have you been?" However, deep inside his body, there was no sound at all. Gong Fan had disappeared. Yu Yu was feeling dejected when he suddenly heard Yun Shirshir's serious voice outside the door. "No. You can't take Yu Yu and Natalia away." When Yu Yu heard this, he turned around and looked through the gap in the door. He saw Yun Shirshir sitting on the sofa with a determined expression. "I won't let you take Yu Yu and Natalia away." It turned out that Alice had tactfully mentioned that she hoped that Yu Yu and Natalia would be taken away for some research. When Yun Shirshir heard this, she was like a cat that had been provoked. She immediately became alert and her attitude was resolute. Although she still maintained a calm and polite attitude, the resistance in her eyes was obvious. "No," she said firmly, "I know that you're doing this for Yu Yu's good, but I won't allow Yu Yu to leave my side again." When Alice heard this, she sighed helplessly. She understood Yun Shirshir's concerns. However, she had reaped what she had sown. After all, she had hypnotized Yu Yu and wiped away Yu Yu's memories. Yun Shirshir was more or less afraid of her. "If Yu Yu were to be handed to me, would you also be worried?" Yin Shirshir didn't speak. She bit her lip and clenched her fists. Alice said, "As you said, there is indeed a problem with Gong Fan's disappearance for so long. I'm just as worried as you are. However, if we don't take you and Natalia back for research, I won't be able to find out what happened to them. I won't be able to determine what happened to them. Hence, I want to take them back for research. We can only find out what the problem is then. Moreover, I also feel that Natalia's situation is very dangerous now. I can't guarantee that." No. When it came to this topic, Yin Shirshir's attitude was as firm as steel. Alice immediately lowered her head helplessly and rubbed her forehead with a headache. When Huajin heard this, he was a little worried. "You said that Natalia's situation is very dangerous now. What kind of danger is it? You haven't seen her second personality until now?" "Yes," Huajin replied honestly. Chapter 4198. However, Shirshir said that she suspected that Gong Fan had been hypnotized by Natalia's second personality. "Yes. Then this proves that," Alice said slowly. "This is a personality who knows how to disguise herself. In other words, she might have appeared before, but you didn't realize that she had successfully deceived you and hypnotized you while pretending to be Natalia's personality." Everyone fell silent. These words were a little scary when they thought about it carefully. If it was really as Alice said, if that personality was good at disguising herself, then it would be too scary. Huajin didn't know why, but he was a little lost. It would have been better if Alice hadn't said that. Now that she said that, he suddenly remembered that indeed, sometimes, when Natalia appeared in front of him, she gave him a very strange feeling. Now that he thought about it carefully, that personality might be Natalia, but she had disguised herself as Natalia. Perhaps he just didn't realize it. Thinking of this, Huajin couldn't help but feel a little uneasy. He suddenly raised his head and asked seriously, "Do you think that there is such a possibility?" Alice listened carefully. "Perhaps Natalia's second personality has already appeared. Perhaps I've seen it before. However, she used this crystal ball to hypnotize me and Gong Fan at the same time. We've all forgotten that memory, so we don't know anything about it, and we don't know that she once existed. Then, is it possible that she used this crystal ball to indirectly hypnotize Natalia and control her so that she could freely change her personality?" When Alice heard this, she didn't show too much surprise on her face. In other words, Huajin continued his analysis with Alice. "Now that I've put away this crystal ball, Natalia has a feeling of anxiety. I've looked up information about hypnosis. If a person is hypnotized for a long time and the hypnosis is interrupted, the person's mind will become extremely anxious and reject the hypnosis. It can even lead to drowsiness, illness, and the deterioration of various immune systems." Alice nodded and felt that his analysis was very pertinent. "I also have the same suspicion. So because of this, I want to bring both of them back for observation for a period of time. Otherwise, I won't be at ease. However, as you can see, if I really bring both of them back, Shirshir won't be at ease." Everyone fell silent again. Not only Yin Shirshir, but even Huajin was worried that Natalia would be in danger if she was taken away by Alice. After spending some time together, it was impossible to say that Huajin didn't have any feelings for Natalia. He couldn't bear to hand Natalia over to Alice. It was too risky. His heart would ache. He couldn't even imagine Natalia being trapped in the laboratory and subjected to those inhumane experiments. However, if he kept Natalia by his side, he couldn't guarantee that Natalia's condition would be stable. What should he do? Huajin was also in a dilemma. He raised his head and looked at Yin Shirshir. He saw that she was in a daze, but he didn't know what she was thinking. Chapter 4199. Alice clenched her fists and suddenly looked up. Her expression was firm as if she had made a big decision. She said firmly, "Since you can't bear to part with you, then I'll come over. If Huajin doesn't mind, I'll settle down in his house. On one hand, I can take care of Natalia and observe her. On the other hand, I can monitor Yu's condition. This way, you won't be separated from your son. What do you think?" Huajin and Yin Shirshir were in disbelief when they heard this. Especially Yin Shirshir. She found it hard to believe that Alice would leave everything in Hurricane to take care of Natalia. "You. What about your work at Hurricane? What are you going to do?" What else can I do? I can only run from side to side. Otherwise, I won't be able to rest assured about Natalia and you. This is the only way. Alice said it casually. However, Yun Shirshir knew from Gong Jia that although Alice was young, she had achievements that did not match her age. Hence, she had a lot of work to do at Hurricane. Was she willing to leave everything behind to take care of Natalia and Yu? Yun Shirshir felt a little guilty. Hua Jin was also a little hesitant. Are you sure? I heard that you have a lot of work to do. You can't be running back and forth all the time, right? It's fine. Alice sighed deeply. Actually, I can understand Shirshir. After all, Shirshir is a little traumatized by my hypnotism. I understand that she doesn't dare to take the risk. But I can also understand you. But I'm still surprised that you and Natalia have such deep feelings for each other in such a short time. Hua Jin smiled embarrassedly when he heard this. He said helplessly, I just feel a little sorry for her. I want to give her a good childhood. At least, she doesn't have to spend all her time in the hospital. Upon hearing this, Alice's gaze warmed, but she couldn't help but tease. Are you being so careful because Gong Jia threatened you? I'm afraid that if I don't take good care of Natalia, Gong Jia will blame me. Hua Jin hesitated for a long time and had to admit, well, that's one of the reasons. Gong Jia said that if I didn't take good care of Natalia, he would kill me. Who? It was as if a cold current had blown past. Alice and Yun Shirshir looked at each other awkwardly and remained silent for a long time. They had almost been touched by the father-daughter relationship between Hua Jin and Natalia, but now, in the end, Gong Jia's threats were more effective. It was obvious that to Hua Jin, Gong Jia was a demon king. Even though he was afraid of Gong Jia, he still treated Gong Jia's words as an imperial edict. Alice resisted the urge to laugh and asked curiously, You are that afraid of him? You can't say that I'm afraid. Hua Jin said carefully. Then what is it? Yun Shirshir and Alice asked almost at the same time. Hua Jin answered meticulously. I think it's respect. Respect? This word almost made Yun Shirshir burst out laughing uncontrollably. Using the word respect was a bit too ridiculous. Chapter 4200. That's true. After hearing this, Hua Jin agreed that there was indeed nothing to fear from Gong Jia. Although his identity was a little shocking to ordinary people, once they were familiar with him, they would not be so fearful. But for some reason he was clearly hinting to himself that Gong Jia was just an ordinary person, and there was no need to be afraid of him. However, every time Gong Jia stood in front of him, there was an invisible aura that felt like it was going to break his bones. Even if a person with a strong aura did not have any expression on his face, he was still imposing. However, for some reason, Hua Jin had an inexplicable desire to gossip about Gong Jia. Did you grow up with him? I guess so. When I met him, he was still a young and inexperienced teenager. However, after being in Hurricane for so many years, I heard his father gossip about what he was like when he was young. Yun Shirshir was also interested. She and Gong Jia were separated when they were young, and only reunited after a long time. Therefore, she was very interested in Gong Jia's childhood. What was Gong Jia like when he was young? Alice narrowed her eyes and frowned slightly. She thought hard for a long time but did not know where to start. How should I put it? Yun Shirshir gave her a clue. When did Xiao Jia return to the Gong family? Alice was stunned. After hesitating for a long time, she said, I remember old master mentioning that when Gong Jia returned to the Gong family, there was an accident. I think you should know about that accident, Shirshir. Because of a car accident, when old master brought Gong Jia back, he seemed to have lost that part of his memory. He only remembered that he had an older sister. According to him, the rest of his memories were blurry. When he returned to the Gong family at a young age, he lost his mother and older sister because of a car accident. However, that accident was like a dream to Gong Jia at that time. When he returned to the Gong family, the little fellow did not know how to cry, nor did he know how to make a fuss. Later on, after a long period of hunger strikes, he became malnourished. Thus he was put on an intravenous drip. Later, no one knew what Gong Xiaoying and Gong Jia talked about, but the two of them stayed in the study for the whole afternoon. Gong Xiaoying took a bottle of whiskey and gave it to the little guy. At that time, The attendants were terrified. The Gong Jie was a noble young master. There were many people who tried to stop the Gong Xiaoying from giving alcohol to such a young child. However, with Gong Xiaoying's expression, no one could stop him. She only knew that Gong Jie was drunk that day. He was drunk, but he didn't make a fuss. He just sat on the sofa stubbornly. His eyes were red, and his tears dripped onto the carpet, wetting his eyelashes. The more he drank, the harder he cried. He sobbed for his mommy and sister. Gong Xiaoying had no choice but to tell him the cruel truth. His mother was dead, and so was his sister. All of a sudden, it was as if the floodgates had been opened. The little guy cried the whole night. The next day he started to have a high fever and almost contracted pneumonia. When the fever subsided, he finally woke up from his muddle-headed state. However, his temperament had changed greatly. He didn't like to smile, and he didn't cry easily. Chapter 4201. Yin Shirsha recalled. When Xiao Jie was young, he wasn't that domineering. In fact, he loved to smile. I loved to see him smile. It was so contagious. No matter how sad he was, his smile would sweep away the gloominess in his heart. From then on, he rarely smiled. From then on, Gong Jie began to receive military training in the Gong family. Gradually, as he grew older, he began to stand out among his peers. Gong Xiaoying was proud of having such an outstanding son. When he reached adulthood, he gradually entrusted him with some of the Hurricane Group's affairs. Gong Jie was very capable. Whatever Gong Xiaoying entrusted to him, he would always complete it well. However, Gong Xiaoying obviously underestimated his son's ambition. As the saying goes, the younger generation will surpass the older. This saying was true. Gong Jie's ambition would only be greater than Gong Xiaoying's, not less than Gong Xiaoying's. The Gong family consisted of the main family and many other branches. In such a large family, it was inevitable that the juniors of Gong Jie's age would have their first awakening of love when they were young. Young men like Gong Jie were addicted to debauchery at that time, but Gong Jie had no interest in women. Did you know? At that time, Master was very anxious. He thought that his son's orientation was abnormal. That's why he's been hinting to Gong Jie to find a girlfriend. For some reason, Hua Jin's eyelids twitched violently when he heard Alice's words. He didn't dare to look into Alice's eyes. He thought to himself, could it be that Gong Jie really had no interest in women? Yin Shirsha was also worried. I also feel that Xiao Jie has no interest in women, but that shouldn't be the case, right? A straight man like him shouldn't like men. After pausing for a moment, Yin Shirsha changed the topic. However, even if Xiao Jie likes men, I will support him. As long as it's someone he likes, I will support him unconditionally. Cough. Hua Jin happened to be drinking water and choked at the wrong time. Yin Shirsha looked at him and rebuked. You can even choke on water? Nothing. Hua Jin quickly added. I was scared by you. However, Gong Jie definitely doesn't like men. Are you sure? Alice disagreed. Most of the men I've seen think with their lower bodies. Logically speaking, adult men should have physiological needs that other men have, right? Even if he didn't talk about feelings, it was too illogical that he didn't have a woman after so many years. Anyway, everyone in the Gong family thinks that he's abnormal. Cough, this might not necessarily be the case. Some men have better self-control. Haha. Alice couldn't help but say. You really don't understand men. Could it be that you've never had a woman before? Hua Jin looked away guiltily. He had a woman. However, he had never been willing to have one. Speaking of which, he didn't seem to have any special feelings for a woman. Lin Xueya was one thing. When it came to Lin Xueya, he only had a sense of routine. When he was on the same set as Yin Shirsha, he had interacted with her a lot. He had thought that Yin Shirsha's ignorant feelings were probably just love. In fact, it was just a kind of dependence that longed for a family member. Chapter 4202. He treated Yin Shirsha as his own sister, and did not have any messy feelings for her. Therefore, he did not really understand why those men had a special obsession with women. He felt that he could probably lead a good life alone. Yin Shirsha also agreed with Alice's words. Hua Jin, you think that you don't understand men. Most men, if they don't have feelings for women, they can also sleep on the same bed. They are different from women. Is this what you call a biological need? You can understand it that way. Yin Shirshir continued. Humans have 7 emotions and 6 desires. They are not gods or saints, so how can they be pure? Hua Jin's face turned even redder. Yin Shirshir did not notice, but Alice did. She felt that it was a little strange. She did not know why Hua Jin's face was so red. She did not think too much about it. Anyway, Gong Jie was obsessed with work for a long time. At that time, he went to a war-torn area like Africa without hesitation. He was young and frivolous, and he did not hesitate to go to a place where no one should go. He always laughed at me for being a workaholic, but when it comes to work, he is far more strict and serious than I am. Moreover, he is very domineering and stubborn. Once he has decided on something, he will not allow anyone to overturn it, not even master. I don't think Xiao Jie is very domineering. Yin Shirshir was a little puzzled. No matter what, he will listen to me no matter what I say. That's because to Gong Jie, you are definitely the most special one. When he has a girlfriend in the future, I might not be the most special one. When Alice heard this, she suddenly smiled, and her eyes revealed a look of envy. You know what? I'm especially envious of you, she said sincerely. Yin Shirshir heard this and was a little puzzled. Why? What do I have to be envious of? I'm envious of you. You've already achieved so much at such a young age. Alice couldn't help but smile bitterly. In fact, no matter how strong she was at work, Alice was still a woman. In the past, she had also yearned for love and family. She envied Yin Shirshir because whether it was Mu Yaja, her 2 sons, her friends, or even an arrogant man like Gong Jie, they all doted on her like a princess. She lived her life as a strong woman. Yin Shirshir, on the other hand, lived like a princess. No matter which woman you asked, who wouldn't yearn for it? If he said that he didn't yearn for it, it was only because he couldn't get it. Everyone was different. Yin Shirshir may not have a strong personality, nor was she the type of strong woman who could take charge of everything on her own. But because of this, everyone was willing to dote on her like a princess. She had a special quality about her that even she couldn't help but want to treat her well when she met her. It was probably because there was a kind of nobility in her bones. It was just that this noble temperament was very gentle. No matter who it was, she could get along well with them. She had no sharp edges and was as gentle as water. Even Chu Ho, who was born with a weak brain, liked Yin Shirshir. Alice yearned for a family, but the key word family was too distant for her. Chapter 4203. The topic of the 3 of them changed from Gong Jie to Alice. Yin Shirshir, on the other hand, was very curious. Half jokingly and half seriously, she asked if Alice had a boyfriend. Alice made it clear that she didn't want to get married. You don't want to get married? Yin Shirshir didn't look surprised when she heard that. Some women didn't like to get married, probably because they were disappointed in men and marriage. They didn't want marriage to restrict their freedom. Alice said frankly, "Actually, I have a lot of expectations for marriage and family. But this expectation is too heavy. I can't ask for it, so I don't want it anymore." Why? Yin Shirshir, on the other hand, could not understand what he meant. Logically speaking, those who didn't want to get married were usually those who had been hurt emotionally. Otherwise, they didn't have any hopes or expectations for marriage. However, as Alice said, since she had expectations for marriage, why did she insist on not getting married? Alice could also see Yin Shirshir's doubts. She took a deep breath and said calmly, "I can't have children, and I'm destined to not be able to have children. In the past, I've thought about getting married and having a family. But because of my body's condition, it seems that it can't be realized. Since it can't be realized, I don't want to have any more fantasies." How can that be? Yin Shirshir was surprised when she heard that she couldn't have children. She had never heard Alice mention this before. Now that she mentioned it, she was surprised. Hence, she felt a little strange. What happened? Alice didn't hide it from her. She said, "I remember that it was a few years ago. Gong Jie came back from Africa and was infected with the plague there. I still remember that time in Africa, the plague was rampant. When Gong Jie came back to Hurricane, he was immediately quarantined. At that time, no one could do anything about this virus. In Africa, once someone is infected with this virus, they are treated like corpses. Many people who are infected with this virus are thrown into the quarantine zone like rotting livestock. Most of them starve to death before the virus takes over their lives. Starve to death. When Yin Shirshir heard this, her heart couldn't help but clench. Of course, she knew that Gong Jie had recovered, but how did he recover? Yin Shirshir faintly felt that it must be related to Alice's infertility. She used to pay attention to the news when she was in university, so she knew about the Amelia virus in Africa. Is it the Amela virus? Alice nodded. It was the Imanla virus. At that time, Gong Jie's infection had not been serious, but no one knew when it had worsened. Yin Shirshir was suddenly enlightened. I heard that a vaccine was developed for that virus, but until now the epidemic in Africa has not been controlled. Yes, Alice said, because the cost of the vaccine is very high. Many places in Africa are relatively barren. Most of the war refugees don't have the means to be cured. Yin Shirshir asked tentatively, this vaccine, was it developed by you? Yes. Then, Yin Shirshir and Hua Jin said almost in unison, was it developed by you? Chapter 4204. At that time, Alice was still a young doctor. She was not an authority in this field. Therefore, she was helpless against such a plague. After Gong Jie and a few others were quarantined, the medical center of Hurricane was out of control for a long time. No one knew how terrible this virus was. It also meant that no one knew how long Gong Jie could survive after being infected with this plague. Many of the mercenaries who came back from Africa with him and were infected with this virus did not survive. Therefore, Alice was very nervous at that time. More importantly, in the end, even though the preliminary vaccine had been obtained, no one dared to put it into use without testing it first. No one dared to test it on Gong Jie's body. Therefore, at that time, Alice did not know what she was thinking. She appeared in the laboratory and calmly proposed the idea of using herself as an experiment subject. Everyone was overjoyed. At that time, Alice was still very young and had not entered Hurricane yet. She was just an intern in the medical center and was not considered an experienced doctor. Therefore, in the eyes of many people, she was worthless. However, since she was willing to use her body as the price, the researchers who were researching the vaccine were naturally surprised. However, Alice was also informed in advance that because the vaccine was the preliminary vaccine, once the implantation failed, the virus would backfire and her life would be in danger. Alice understood, but she was not afraid. She did not hesitate to use herself as an experiment subject. However, as expected, the experiment failed and the virus backfired. She was infected with the virus and was finally out of danger after a few days and nights of emergency treatment. However, because she accepted the human experiment without permission, she was expelled from the hospital. It was also because of the virus that she could not have children for the rest of her life. Because of the infection of the virus, most of the chromosomes in her body were destroyed. Even if she could have children, there was a terrible possibility that she would give birth to a deformed child. Therefore, she gave up. You did it for Gong Jie? Alice suddenly fell silent. She pursed her lips and said calmly, you can think of me as the Virgin Mary. For the health of the world, I sacrificed my life for righteousness. She was so relaxed that it was difficult to see how painful it was to make this choice at that time. However, Alice did not mention that she was willing to do it for the sake of Gong Jie. She had seen Gong Jie before. Before entering the hurricane, she had met him by chance as a medical volunteer in Africa. It was only this side that seemed to last for 10,000 years. She dreamed of entering Hurricane and becoming a member of the Hurricane Medical Center. However, as soon as she arrived at Hurricane, she had to deal with the news that Gong Jie was infected with the virus. She did it almost without thinking, even though she knew that this result was definitely not something she could bear. However, at that time, her head was hot and she didn't think about anything else. Gong Jie didn't even know about it. Alice also rarely mentioned this matter. Infertility was the result of a series of full-body checkups after her recovery. She couldn't accept it, but she had to. Fortunately, Gong Jie didn't have any serious problems. After learning a lesson from Alice, the vaccine was perfected. Therefore, Gong Jie recovered very well. Chapter 4205. This was enough to make Alice feel gratified. At least, Gongjie was doing well. She liked Gongjie. Although it wasn't love, this kind of liking was enough for her to give her all. However, she had never confessed her love for Gongjie to anyone. It wasn't that she didn't think that she was worthy of Gongjie, but she knew that Gongjie had no interest in her. If the feelings of liking someone were not mutually willing, then it would only become a burden to reveal one's heart. Hence, Alice had never mentioned this matter to Gongjie, so that he wouldn't feel burdened. She also didn't feel that Gongjie had to reciprocate her love and her efforts. This wasn't liking someone. This was kidnapping. This was extortion. This wasn't her motive, and it wasn't her style of doing things. Hence, she suppressed this matter in her heart. She also restrained her love for Gongjie deep in her heart. Alice smiled. I didn't expect that my unintentional actions would indirectly save Gongjie. It's really a coincidence. She pretended to be relaxed, but Yin Shishir's expression turned serious when she saw it. Although Alice didn't show any signs of regret, she still probed carefully. Actually, you did all this for Xiao Jie, didn't you? Alice was stunned and didn't say anything. She avoided Yin Shishir's gaze and said casually, No, I only did what I had to do. Because of me, the vaccine was developed and the illness was under control. As for Gongjie, that can only be said to be a coincidence. Since she had already said so, Yin Shishir didn't expose her. However, she could see that Alice was restraining her love for Gongjie. She was almost certain that Alice had ended up infertile because of Gongjie. However, she could understand Alice's feelings even if she didn't say it out loud. Because, if it was a love that was destined to fail, once spoken, it would become a burden. Alice didn't want to put any burden on Gongjie. Thus, she looked calm and collected, carefully protecting her last bit of dignity. She didn't want her liking to become a kind of demanding and pitiful. Actually, it's not a big deal to be infertile. Alice pursed her lips and said seriously, If there is a chance in the future, I can meet someone I like who also likes me. If he doesn't mind, we can adopt a child and treat her as our own. At least, I can fulfill my dream of being a mother. Even if she is not my biological child, I will still treat her as my own. She already had a plan. However, that was a matter for the future. Alice stood up and said to Yin Shishir, I'm going to check on Natalia. In this way, it could be considered as a covert way of avoiding the topic. It was obvious that she wasn't willing to talk much about this matter. Yin Shishir and Huajin also tacitly agreed and stood up with her. The three of them entered the room. At that moment, Yu was sitting in front of the bed and Xiaoyichen was leaning against the sofa. He was obviously sleepy and had fallen asleep. However, he was a light sleeper and had originally closed his eyes to rest. When Alice walked in just now, he woke up with a start. Xiaoyichen opened his eyes and saw that it was Alice and Yin Shishir. He stood up and said, Mommy. Alice, you're here too. Chapter 4206. How's Natalia? Yu said. Her fever seems to have subsided a little. It's not as serious as before. Let me take a look. Alice walked over and took out her thermometer. She scanned her body and the temperature was 39 degrees Celsius. This meant that her fever was slowly subsiding. She relaxed her eyebrows. It seems that her fever is subsiding. Yin Shishir also heaved a sigh of relief. Huajin was still worried. Will it relapse? I don't know. Alice shook her head. My initial suspicion is that she has a fever on the surface of her body. There's no inflammation, no virus infection, and no signs of a cold or fever. I'm guessing that she probably hasn't slept well for a few days. Her body is weak, so it's just a fever on the surface of her body. She should be fine after more rest. Huajin was relieved to hear this. Yin Shishir asked worriedly, Are you sure you're all right now? 39. 8 degrees Celsius. This number scared me. Yu's body was weak when he was young, but he didn't have such a high fever. Alice comforted her. Don't worry, she'll be fine. If anything happens, I'll ensure her safety. Since I'm here today, I don't plan to leave. Don't worry and have fun. It's rare that you have a break, so you should enjoy it. Leave Natalia to me. Huajin couldn't help but feel worried when she said this. He said sadly, I don't have the mood to play anymore seeing her like this. It's okay, I'll stay here to keep her company. Alice nodded. Don't worry, she'll have a good night's sleep. If there are no accidents, her fever should be gone by tomorrow. That's good. With Alice around, Yin Shirshir was relieved. She noticed that Yu Yu's eyes were glued to Natalia, so she walked over to him and squatted down gently. She said seriously, "Stay here and take good care of Natalia, okay?" Yu Yu looked at her, and then at Alice. Suddenly she said, "Since Alice is here, she will take good care of Natalia. I want to accompany Mommy." Yin Shirshir was a little surprised when she heard this. She was not surprised that Yu Yu liked to stick to her since she was young. But, at some point, Yu Yu also started to become independent. Slowly, she no longer relied on her as much as before. She originally thought that Yu Yu wouldn't bear to leave Natalia and would stay to take care of her. She didn't expect him to say that he wanted to stay with her. Yin Shirshir couldn't help but laugh. "Mommy isn't sick. Why do you suddenly want to accompany Mommy?" "Mommy doesn't need Yu Yu to accompany her if she's not sick." Yu Yu suddenly stuck to her and held her hand. He snuggled into her embrace and said coquettishly, "I just want to accompany Mommy." It was rare for Yu Yu to act coquettishly. Whenever he acted coquettishly, it was as if he had returned to the time when Yu Yu was 6 years old. He wanted to stick to her all the time, like a little tail that couldn't be shaken off. Yin Shirshir's heart instantly softened, and her heart collapsed. She gently lifted Yu Yu up. He was already more than 10 years old. When she lifted him up, he instantly rested his head gently on her shoulder, just like when he was young. Yin Shirshir didn't know why, but she could sense a sense of helplessness from him. She was so sensitive. Hence, she felt that Yu Yu was in low spirits today. Chapter 4207. "It's nothing." Yu Yu's voice was muffled. It was not loud, but it sounded weak. "I want to be with Mommy." Yin Shirshir's eyelids suddenly twitched. She frowned slightly. She could vaguely sense that Yu Yu might have overheard her conversation with Alice. But even though she had lowered her voice, Yu Yu might have heard it and kept it in his heart. Would he think that she was worried about Gong Fan, and no longer regarded him as the most important person? Yin Shirshir did not know how to comfort him. She hugged Yu Yu tightly and smiled at Hua Jin and Alice. Then, she carried Yu Yu and turned to leave. There was a long silence on the way back. It was only when they were about to enter the villa that Yu Yu asked softly, "Mommy, are you worried that Gong Fan will never come back?" Yin Shirshir was stunned when she heard this. It was only after a long time that she found her voice. "I'm a little worried. After all, he hasn't appeared for a long time. It's really strange." "Mommy, if he disappears forever, please don't blame me, okay?" Yu Yu was a little helpless and said honestly, "I'm worried too. I'm afraid that he will suddenly disappear. I'm actually prepared to live with him, but I don't know why, but it's as if he suddenly disappeared and I can't find him." Yin Shirshir did not know whether to laugh or cry when she heard this. Why would he think that? Why would you think that? Why would Mommy blame you for this? Yin Shirshir knew that Yu Yu had found out about her worries and helplessness. He felt guilty, helpless and uneasy because of this. She felt helpless. She had not controlled her emotions well, and made Yu Yu so uneasy. "Don't worry, Mommy didn't think too much. Don't be sad. Besides, isn't it a good thing that Gong Fan has disappeared? Does that at least mean that you've recovered?" Yu Yu nodded gently. Yin Shirshir carried him back to the room and comforted him. "Don't let your imagination run wild, okay?" "All right." However, Yu Yu was unwilling to return to the room. Instead, he said to Yin Shirshir, "Mommy, I want to go out to sea." "Go to sea, yes. Let's go out to sea with Daddy and Xiaoyi Chen, okay? What about your sister?" "Younger sister, she's seasick. Moreover, the wind at sea is too strong, and the sun is too strong. Younger sister's skin is so tender. It's not worth it if it peels." "Yes." Yin Shirshir asked Muyaja to charter a boat, and the family of 4 went out to sea. The journey out to sea took a full day. Lunch was also held at sea. Lunch consisted of freshly caught fish that had not undergone too much processing. Everything retained its original taste and was delicious. When Little Chen and Yu Yu went out to sea, they sat back to back and fished by the side of the boat. Yin Shirshir, on the other hand, hugged fresh coconuts and basked in the sun as she fell into a daze. When they returned in the evening, Yin Shirshir went to check on Natalia. Fortunately, Just as Alice had said, her temperature had dropped quickly. Although it had not returned to normal, it meant that she was getting better. Chapter 4208. After the holiday in Saipan ended, Alice went back to Hurricane to complete the procedures. For a long time, she had to travel back and forth between Hurricane and the country to monitor Natalia's condition. Alice settled down in the villa that Gong Jia had bought for Huajin and Natalia. However, after a few days of monitoring, Alice discovered something that could not be underestimated. That was, ever since she lost the crystal ball, Natalia suddenly became very anxious. At night, it was always very difficult for her to fall asleep. Even after she fell asleep, through the sleep quality test, she would always have nightmares. The continuous nightmares always caused her to be in a half-awake state, and the quality of her sleep would be greatly affected. Therefore, it indirectly caused her to be anxious. This meant that the crystal ball had a mysterious effect on Natalia's body. Alice hesitated for a long time, and finally decided to return the crystal ball to Natalia. Before returning the crystal ball to Natalia, she deliberately installed a hidden surveillance camera in the room. The video was directly transferred to Alice's phone through the phone, so that her situation could be monitored 24 hours a day. At first, Huajin objected to the idea. He did not think that Alice could use the surveillance cameras to monitor Natalia, even if she was in such a state. Even a person with dual personality had the right to privacy. However, Alice did not agree. She felt that the most important thing now was to find the connection between the crystal ball and Natalia. Huajin was convinced and did not interfere too much. So, Huajin found an opportunity and returned the crystal ball to Natalia under the excuse that he found it at the airport. Natalia hugged the crystal ball and couldn't bear to put it down. Even her mental state had improved a lot. Huajin saw that she hugged the crystal ball, as if she had found her life again. He could not help but be curious, so he secretly asked her why the crystal ball was so important. Alice said, "At night there will be a fairy in the crystal ball who will sing me to sleep." How is that possible? Huajin kept staring at the crystal ball, but he could not figure out anything. He was puzzled. Where is the fairy? Why can't I see her? If only I can see her. No one else can see her at all. This is a secret between me and her. A secret that only the two of us know. As she spoke, she hugged the crystal ball to her chest, not letting Huajin see it anymore. On the day that Huajin returned the crystal ball to Natalia, Alice turned on the surveillance camera. However, it was this surveillance camera that made Alice discover a very serious problem. She found that every day before she went to bed, Natalia would hold the crystal ball and stare blankly for half a day, as if she could see something from the crystal ball. But then there was an obvious change in her condition. This state was not unfamiliar. Alice knew very well that Natalia had been hypnotized into this state. How could this be? This was somewhat beyond Alice's knowledge. Logically speaking, even if it was hypnotism, it still required the hypnotist and the hypnotist to work together. Not one of them could be missing. The crystal ball was nothing more than an auxiliary tool. Chapter 4209. What was even more surprising was that Alice finally discovered Natalia's second personality during the surveillance. Natalia appeared. It was early in the morning. Alice set an alarm to wake up. Usually, Natalia would wake up at 8 o'clock, but Alice would set an alarm at 7 o'clock. She would wake up early and pay attention to Natalia's situation at all times. She clearly noticed that the moment Natalia opened her eyes, she became a stranger. She didn't know that there were surveillance cameras in the room, and she didn't know that her every word and action was being monitored by Alice. Not to mention her, even Huajin didn't know where Alice had secretly placed the surveillance cameras. In fact, Alice had placed the surveillance cameras very discreetly. There were a total of 10 corners in the entire bedroom, and they were secretly placed with surveillance cameras. One of them was at the head of the bed, directly facing Natalia's face. When she woke up, she didn't have Natalia's usual eyes, but a pair of cold eyes that Alice had never seen before. Cold, dark, and without a trace of the mortal world. This must be the second personality that Professor Romanka had induced, Natalia. She first sat up from the bed, but she didn't put on her clothes immediately. Instead, she sat on the side of the bed for a while. Then, she walked to the desk and sat down. Then, she stared at the calendar for a long time. She seemed to be observing the date and something else. Alice looked at it seriously. She realized that other than the change in Natalia's eyes, there were more strange behaviors. Only then did she really believe that the person in front of her was Natalia's second personality, Natalia, and not Natalia. This at least proved that Professor Romanka's creation theory was absolutely successful. Even if a person had a normal personality, they could still create a dual personality through acquired means. This result almost overturned the understanding of all researchers. Alice got up. At the same time, Huajin had also gotten up and was preparing breakfast. Natalia's breakfast had always been prepared by Huajin. Seeing that Alice had woken up, he was a little surprised and asked curiously, "Why are you up so early?" Although Alice got up early, she didn't have the habit of eating breakfast, so she didn't go downstairs every morning. Alice said to Huajin, "There's a problem." "What happened?" "I have a feeling that Natalia might have switched to a second personality today. Just pretend you don't know." Huajin was slightly surprised, but before he could ask anything, Natalia had already come downstairs. Alice still had doubts about whether the woman was Natalia or not, so she still had her reservations. She assumed that the woman was Natalia for the time being, but she was still suspicious. When Natalia came downstairs, Alice observed her closely. From the angle of the surveillance camera, Natalia was cold and indifferent. She didn't even look like a normal child. But once she came downstairs, she showed Natalia's usual innocent expression. "Morning." She walked to the dining table and sat down obediently with an innocent expression on her face. "Are you still having ham and bread today?"